Yeah, we could just
Yeah.
start where we are. I think that's all we're going to be able to do because, yeah, my nerves are just like noticeably different and more than interviewing somebody else, showing up to get interviewed. I'm like, whoa,
Uh,
what have I been asking people to do? So, yeah, it's
well, I
really
don't
good
know.
medicine for me.
I think this is worth exploring at least a little bit
Oh, good. I love your
because here
excitement.
you are. You're in your comfortable spot. You're in the sauna, the Zoom sauna.
Right,
Hey,
right.
tell me again, where is this? Where are you physically?
It's at my brother's house
Okay.
in my brother's old bedroom.
Okay.
They have the good internet that I don't have at my house. And so if I want to Zoom, I have to come here because
Mhm.
this internet lets me connect on Zoom. The internet at my house is like barely enough for Netflix.
I got you. And so if you were in like if it were a metal room, it probably wouldn't even help that they have this awesome internet. So you've got this wood paneling here, which is
Sure.
super cool. I mean, it gives it a very, I don't know how to, it's like a cozy feel. I love it. But you're in your comfortable spot. You're on Zoom. You have conversations all the time.
Right.
Like this is what you do. This is all
Right?
just part of what you do,
Why is it
right?
different?
I don't
What's
know.
different? Right.
I
I've been
want to
asking
know.
myself that question since I canceled on you 2 weeks ago.
Oh, did you cancel on me 2 weeks ago because you were too nervous?
Yes. Yes. I wasn't ready yet. I was like, I can't do it. I'm so scared. Like, I'm getting red. It's
Yeah.
hot. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like a full-on physical experience to like
Yeah.
go on stage. I mean, and that's,
True.
yeah, I mean, I'm on Zoom all the time. Like, this is no different than
Yeah.
all the other times I've sat in this chair. And
Well, I
yet,
find it interesting because I'm a little bit more nervous too. And I think I know why. For me, it's, when you were interviewing me, all I had to do was show up and just answer the questions. Like I just listen and go, yeah. So on this side of it, like I have to put at least a little bit more thought into the extraction process. Like, what do I, you know, be, in fact, you have to be comfortable and I have to be comfortable probably in order for it to really work the very best it can, right? So that
totally.
made me a little bit nervous. And then here's what kind of settled me down a little bit. I was like, it's not live. Like at the very least, if I completely screw this up, and if Carly says the worst thing that could happen is that you could say, well, I don't feel like that went very well. And so I'm going to ask somebody else to interview me. And you know what, Carly, if you do that, I will not be mad at all. I will understand completely. But that's the worst case here. And in fact, for you, like you are making the recording. I don't even have that.
Yeah.
Like you could run with it. I mean, I don't think you would, but like you could run with something I wasn't comfortable with. You can't. Your worst case here is that you just say, this hour that I spent with Will, I'm just going to burn it.
Yeah, that was just for fun, you
That
know?
was just it's practice. It's
Dude.
practice round. And in
And
fact,
so,
we could just do it again next week.
exactly. That, okay, so that's what's really interesting about 2 weeks ago. I just had to delay it. I was like, I just can't. And then this morning, that was the same power that came to me was like, you are making this. Like, if you don't like
Yeah,
it, then throw that pancake in the trash and make another one. Like,
exactly.
dude, you got veto power. It's fine. And so that was also what let me show up today. And like, we don't need to keep kicking this can down the road. Let's just try it and see what
Oh,
happens.
this is
Yeah.
wild.
Panic.
I'm surprised, but then again, I'm also not because like life is just funny that way. And you know what? When I look at across the body of work that you've created, one of the I guess themes is like how did all of these folks get to that place that they were always meant to be, right? And and I guess that's what we want to know from you. Like, how did you get to this place where you are now, which is probably where you were meant to be, and being the person who extracts it from other people and does it brilliantly and beautifully, and I commend you for it. But I think people are going to be interested. This can make you nervous, or it can make you encouraged to go on and do the thing that must be done. People want to know where that comes from. Like, where does that skill and where does that desire come from that you have? And so maybe we'll figure out how to get there today. And I mean, I think it seems like one of your kind of original, one of your primary questions is always to start off just by, telling us about the beginning. Where
Yeah.
did you grow up and what was that like?
Yeah. Let's just do it. See what
Let's
happens.
do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Why not? So I was born in Topeka, Kansas in
Okay.
1988, and the first of my parents' four children. So I'm the oldest. I have three
Okay.
younger brothers who came along very quickly after I did. And
Okay.
I say that because so by the time I go to preschool, I'm leaving at home my 3-year-old brother, my 1-year-old brother, and my 1 month old brother. And I'm going to preschool. And my mom is at home with all the brothers, the little herd of them. And yeah, that was like a big piece of my growing up was being the oldest of these four kids. Um,
What
yeah,
was that like at preschool? Like, was it kind of like a relief to get out of the house and away from all those brothers, though I'm sure you love them now? Or was it
it
like,
was so
I don't
calm.
want to, I want to be, I want to stay in this place with my family?
It was a lot more like peaceful at school, and there was a lot more attention at school. There was a teacher whose full-time focus was showing you cool things, like just wanting you to see, like, look at this fun story, look at how this thing works, look at this. And like, you just got to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. And I loved school. I loved school. It was like I mean, I'm 4 years old going to preschool and just thinking, like, wow, like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, why did it take me 4 years to show up at school? Like, why can't we go sooner? Like, every year, the first day of school, that was like my favorite day every single year. Better than Christmas. The night before the first day of school, that was like, yeah,
Wow.
the shit. I
And
love
so, I mean, the three brothers, you're in the home of one of them right now doing this interview. So,
all three
like,
of them,
there must
actually.
be, are you all still close or like, how does
Yeah,
that work now?
physically, especially, we all live in the same zip code, so that
Okay.
counts for something. And I see them a lot more now than I did. I lived in Texas for like 6 years, and so I didn't see them very much during that phase. But um, yeah, no, we get along. My family and I also get along. I will say, like, I feel like an artist of sorts, like a creative. I like to experiment. I like to try different stuff. I like to learn different stuff. I dabble in lots of different things. And I come from an extremely hardworking family. Like that is what is most valuable and cherished is like your work ethic. And so yeah, like in general, I feel like my family is extremely hardworking, extremely entrepreneurial, very talented people. And I am too, but in a little bit slightly different way that
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just like kind of doesn't mix exactly. Like it doesn't just dissolve one into the other and like make for a super harmonious mixture when you put me inside this group of people.
Right. I
The
mean, one could be an extremely hardworking and entrepreneurial
artists
artist,
I
right?
I got the training I got and I'm making the best of it, you know? And I got a killer work ethic. And
Yeah.
I say killer because like I also would call myself like a recovering workaholic
Oh, sure.
where
Yeah.
like you can take that just way too far as far as like if you want to put a good work ethic up on a pedestal and then chase after it. I mean, I feel like I ran myself off a cliff
Yeah.
multiple times, like trying to live up to my own impossible standards kind of thing.
I can so relate to that. And I bet many of your viewers and listeners can relate to that too.
Mm.
It's a weird thing that has sort of changed over the course of my lifetime where, yeah, in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, like it was almost sort of universally worshiped that notion of a work ethic. And I think now, some of the younger generations probably do a better job with kind of the balance of that all. And sure, it's good to accomplish things, but it's also good to, have some balance in one's life. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope. So I'm
Well,
curious. Tell me more about your parents. Like, where does this come from? Is it parents? Is it grandparents? Is it like extended family, aunts, uncles? What did they do, and
kind of
how
all
did
of,
this all
yeah,
end up like
all
that?
of them. Actually, when I was growing up, and still now, my mom's side of the family is pretty close as far as my mom's siblings and my mom's parents and all of us cousins. And I was the only girl cousin out of 10 boy cousins on my mom's
Wow.
side of the family. And I'm like right in the middle of this big group of boys. And again, it's like sports and hard work. Like that's what's going on in
Mm,
the family. But yeah,
yeah.
my mom's parents, they had their own business from gosh, like in the 50s probably, like back
Okay.
when my parent or my mom and her siblings were born, and they did trucking and welding and built pipe fences and those kinds of things and ran it for gosh, like 50 years or 60 until my grandpa
Wow.
died. I mean, it was like he never retired. He just passed away and the business closed a couple years after that. And then my mom met my dad a few months after he started his own business. And so since 1982, they have been running their business together. So that's what, like 41 years of being in the same business. I mean, doing slightly different operations, moving ahead with technology mostly, but selling and servicing milking equipment is what my dad started doing, like I said, a few months before he met my mom. He had been basically doing that, working for somebody else. And a lot like a lot of the stories we hear on My Grocery Adventure, like, why did you leave? Why did you do something different? I didn't like who I was working with. I thought,
Yeah.
you know what? I can do this all by myself. And so he goes off on his own. And then he meets my mom and they, date for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before they get married and start having kids. So running their own business together as husband wife, like I saw my parents doing it and I grew up right next door to my grandparents and I saw them doing it. So
Wow.
I mean, it just to be an entrepreneur, to like build your own business that is yours, that you run it however you want. That was like my model of what it meant to do a good job in the world. And like, basically the question just always was like, what is the business? Not, am I going to be an entrepreneur? Am I not going to be an entrepreneur? It's like, what am I going to do? How am I
Mm.
going to create? What am I going to create?
Well, that's another interesting thing. I think, again, 40 years ago, that notion of work ethic was important, primary, and that notion of entrepreneur valued to some degree, but less. Those have clearly flipped in the last 40 years. Now, I think we listen to somebody talk about their entrepreneurial vision or the execution of that, and we're like, we value that really highly. The
Mm.
notion of them working 85 hours a week, never sleeping, ignoring their family, like we're like, okay, whatever, we can live without
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So very interesting. And boy, talk about businesses that are kind of magnets for people who work really hard: trucking, welding, fencing, selling and servicing milking equipment. I mean, I'm trying to think. I couldn't think of too many businesses where I suspect the marketplace has changed more over the last 40 years, right? I mean, like anything that has to do with like ag, but milk, like dairy farms, especially, like I'm far from an expert, but wow, I think there's been massive changes in the last 40 years. So, how do you keep a business going through that level of change? I have no idea. I'm impressed by
Yeah.
the notion, though.
Yeah. Both of them, both of my parents, I feel like they're very impressive people. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of like continuing to educate yourself. Like I think about in my dad's office, in his corner of it, he's got like all of his like completion plaques from all of the courses that he sent himself to like learn this new equipment or learn this new system or learn this new like 40 years worth. So there's quite a few of them up there. And now it's kind of extending over this way where my three brothers, they all work in that business, like with my parents. All three of them
What?
moved in there. And so Ross is the robot guy. he's the one that's like leading the charge on this next wave of technology that is like taking the labor out of milking with these automated robot milkers. I'll see if I can find a video and like link it in the description where it's like a chute that the cow walks into and the robot is going to scan like the ID bracelet on the cow. And so we know like when did we last milk this cow? And if it's
Mhm.
been long enough ago, then we give the cow a little treat to eat out here in front and the sensor starts finding the udder and puts on the milking apparatus and then the cow gets milked and when it's done the chute opens and the cow walks out and now if the cow's like hey I want another treat let me walk around and like get back in there the first thing is scan the ID bracelet and it's like I just milked you it's got to be at
Sorry.
least 6 more hours before we're going to try again and it just like kicks them back out so that is what they're doing right now in milking is like they just put them in a pen with one of those robots and let them milk themselves.
I have to say, it kind of ruins the old joke, Carly. Perhaps you've heard it.
What
The
is it?
salesman walks to the farm and knocks on the farmer's door and he says, "Hey, I've got this device to sell you." And the farmer says, "Okay, tell me about it." And he says, "It'll do half of the work for you." And the farmer says, "Great, I'll take two of them, please."
Yeah.
And obviously
Yeah.
the joke is that like there's no getting around it. Like there's labor on the farm, man. Like you got to work, you got to work, you got to work. As
Yeah.
much as people would like to save it from you, you can't. This technology is rendering the joke obsolete.
Yeah. Well, there's so much labor needed in a dairy farm. And
Oh,
as soon as you start losing that, or, like you don't have anybody who wants to buy it, or like the parents are, aging out of it and nobody wants to take it over. And what are they taking over? They're taking over an operation that runs like 20 hours a day, 365 days a year for the rest of your life.
yeah,
So, I mean, that's what you're inheriting. Do you want
yeah,
it? And our generation is saying, no, I don't want it. And so the farms that are adopting these robots are the farms where the parents are basically being told by the next generation, like, you will build this infrastructure and we will take it over.
yeah.
Like, we're not going to take it in its current form. But if you
Mhm.
will work with us to go ahead and make the investment so that all of this is established, then yeah, we can run this. We can do that. And so there are multiple farms that are making the investment in the technology. And that's what I mean, their business isn't all the way to robots by any means. They still service
Mhm.
a lot of parlors and lots of various different sizes of operations. But yeah, that's definitely where it's headed is like, you deserve a quality of life just because you milk cows doesn't mean you should be a slave. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be
That
like that
is
anyway.
absolutely fascinating. I mean, well, thank you. I learned something interesting today. And gosh,
Cool. Got
I
that
have
done.
all kinds of opportunities to work with all kinds of businesses. I had no idea about that. That's really interesting.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'll put a link so you can see the robot in action. And then
Okay. Yeah.
basically, like, that's the milking piece. And they have robots that are feeders that like
Mhm.
scooch the feed where it's supposed to be so they can reach it. There's robots that are doing this. There's robots doing this. Like, you got to buy them all individually, but if they're all doing their thing and working, you're eliminating jobs with every single bit of it, which
Yeah.
is an ethical, like you're eliminating jobs. But like in this case, I think
Yeah.
you're setting some people free who were
I think that's not much
previously
of an ethical
enslaved.
gray area. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say.
Turn my
Wow.
video
Interesting.
back
We
on.
just got a picture of you on the screen.
I know it kicked my video off for a second, but I'm gonna see if I can turn it back on.
It did that to me earlier. Remember?
I know.
Hmm.
Let me try
Well,
unplugging it and plugging it back in.
while you're getting your video back up, I guess I'm curious. You say you were born in Topeka, and the business seems more, I guess, rural than that. But like, is that where you were raised? Like, did you grow up in Topeka? Did you go to high school in Topeka? Ah, you're back.
There we go. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
cool. So I was born in Topeka, but my parents already lived in Whorton at the time, Whorton, Kansas. So that's like 30 minutes north of Topeka. The town itself is maybe 3,200 people. Jackson County, where it's at, is maybe 12,000 people. Um, and when I was born, my parents lived south of town. And when I was two, they built a house north of town, and that's where they still live. So I lived like in the same house for from the time I was two to the time I was 18, and I left for college. So, yeah.
And south of town, north of town, meaning Whorton. So you were born like in a hospital in Topeka, but really yeah, okay, I got it.
Yeah, my parents and their first kid, they wanted like a bigger hospital just in case like something went wrong or
Sure.
anything. And with all three of my brothers, they were born in Whorton at the Whorton
Yeah.
Hospital,
By the
which
time you're on number four, it's like, well, yeah,
we
okay,
got this. Yeah,
yeah,
it's no big
we can
deal.
do this. Okay. So what? I don't know. What was Whorton like?
Um, well, okay, so let me go back to like school in general
Okay.
because I didn't know about Whorton, right? I only knew about school.
Okay.
Because like I didn't live in town. My parents didn't really put us in a whole lot of activities when we were that little. So like we're at home north of town, next door to my grandparents. So like
Well,
the
how far north of town are we talking here?
couple
Like
miles, not
okay.
not super far, but far
Well,
enough
you
where
had to
like
get to the grocery store or the gas station. You just
you
go.
can't walk anywhere when you're a little
Oh,
kid. Like there's no kids next door. There's no
gotcha.
like daycare kids that you're going to go and interact with and socialize with. So, like, my first socializing outside of my family was when I went to school. And so that was my beginning of learning about Whorton, was interacting with the other kids that live there. And so
Uh,
it was a wild ride, but not necessarily because of Whorton, but because like I didn't know for a couple years it took me to figure out that there's two different parts of school. There's the learning part and there's the social part. And the social part is an animal that I just like I literally looked around one time in second grade and was like, was I just gone the day that they taught us how to make friends?
oh,
Did I just like was I sick and nobody gave me the assignments? Like they paired everybody up and they put us in our little social groups and like I was just gone that day. Like nobody filled me in and like they just never taught us how to make friends and like I'm looking around at everybody who just knows how to do that and like why do you guys all know how to do that? And a huge part of it I found out as the years went on and I studied the social side of school and I tried to crack into it, very little success. But a lot of it was because they were in groups together. They were like they all went to the same church or
oh,
they all played on the same baseball team or like
yeah,
whatever it was. They all lived in this same housing development. Like that's
right.
where their friends came from, was not at school. It was in all of this stuff that happened outside of school. And like I was just at home with my family outside of school. That was my social. And so that dynamic, I go into it because like it sets up the path for my whole life as far as where I was, I would say like at age 7. This was probably one of my earliest, most formative experiences of my whole life at 7 years old was joining 4-H. Oh, dang it. Keeps kicking my camera off.
Yeah, that's weird. But you're right in this really fascinating
I
formative
know.
moment of
I
joining
know.
4-H, and you got
I'm
to
ready to
come
go for it too.
this route. Oh my goodness.
Try.
Here, while you're getting the camera turned back on, there's a little opposite of this that kind of strikes me. I had
Okay.
this is 10, 15 years ago, but I had a student from China that worked with me. He was like a student employee in the SBDC office, and I don't know that I'd ever really had much time to just sit and discuss things with a person from China. And so he grew up in the one child era, right? And so it's the exact opposite of you. Like he gets here, and I'm like, so, tell me about your aunts and uncles and cousins, your family back home. And he's like, no, man, one child. And that goes back a bunch of generations. It means neither of my parents have a brother nor a sister. It means I don't have an aunt or an uncle. It means I don't have cousins. You trace that back even 2 generations, and all that stuff goes away. You just don't have them. So it's really the opposite of your experience. And I think your audio might be out. I'm not sure.
Is
Oh,
it
there you are.
okay?
No, I got you.
Yeah.
So 4-H, 4-H.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Okay. So 4-H, which is a whole reason like why I joined is a whole nother story. But I get into 4-H, and one of the requirements of 4-H is that you pick a project. You have to have at least one. And so you can do sewing, or you can have a bucket calf, or like whatever you want to do. There's lots of options. And so I get into sewing, and the other component that's required in 4-H is I think it's every year, maybe twice a year, you have to give a project talk. You have to stand at the front of the room and talk about whatever your project is and the process and what you're doing, what you learned, and all the things. And so the first time I did this is like my first public speech is at 7 years old in front of the 50 people in my 4-H group. And at school, and in a very busy household, which was not like anybody's fault, but there was just a lot going on at home. And then at school, there's no friends. So, like, I had this feeling of like wondering on a regular basis, am I invisible? Like, do I exist? Am I real? Do I think I'm real, but nobody else can see me? Like, it was
That is fascinating.
it was just bizarre, like how
Yeah.
you can be around a bunch of other people and like you still don't know if you're real or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so then you walk in front of 50 people who all at the same time listen with undivided attention and then respond with a round of applause. I can't even describe to you the feeling when I went and sat back down in my chair. I was a different person. Like
In what way? Like, I assume that was a great feeling, but I suppose it could be an overwhelming, scary, not great feeling too. I
all
don't
of the above, yeah, for sure. And like the feeling was I'm real. They all
know.
just looked
Wow.
at me. They all just acknowledged my existence all at the same time. Like I know for sure now that I'm real. Like it was a
Mm.
confirmation of like I'm truly not invisible. Sometimes it may feel like I am, but I'm actually not. There are ways of stepping out and being seen. And yeah,
I'm curious, was that after that formative event, did people that otherwise maybe wouldn't have talked to you then start talking to you because they had at least questions about that, or were impressed by your presentation and decided that you were worth kind of pursuing a conversation with, or what?
yeah. I don't remember that. I
So
don't,
this was all just an internal
yeah,
thing. There was no external about it. It was
not that I
just
remember, other
yeah,
than they clapped when I was done. Like they
that's
all
great.
seemed to know that I was done now. And I'm like, well, they must have been paying attention. And so, yeah, it was just like this internal confirmation that like I talked and somebody listened. And it gave me the seed, like the seed was planted like that evening that I am going to be a professional public speaker.
I'm gonna be in showbiz.
Yeah. When
I'm
can I
going to
get
Broadway.
back in front of, oh, no, nothing like that, but like a professional public speaker? I'm going to give speeches and people are going to watch. And that's what I'm going to do. When can I do the next one? And this set up this arc of when can I do the next one? So, like, I kept doing the project talks and I entered my first public speaking contest in 5th grade, where that's where like I wanted to write a speech and give it. And I wanted judges to tell me, like, did I do the best or were there
Sure.
people who did better than me? And I mean, that began like a long career of like winning public speaking contests.
So did you do like forensics in high school, like debate and extemporaneous speaking and all that kind of thing?
I did forensics for like a hot second, and then I did not do it anymore. But there was FFA in
Oh,
high
okay.
school that had prepared public speaking. It also had extemp, which I did not do. Um, and it had part law where like you could practice debate and making arguments and motions and all of that.
Wow, I'll be darned. I didn't know that FFA had all that.
Yeah.
Then
And a
that's
bunch
another
more stuff, but
important
I focused on the ones where I would get to make speeches.
one. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
I really
And
wanted
so, and where did you go to high school then?
in Holton. So
Whorton.
I did preschool through 12th grade, all in Holton, through like several different buildings. There was about, I think we had one of the bigger classes, and there was like 110 kids in my class. And maybe the normal classes were more like 80.
Yeah, that seems big for a town of not much more than 3,000 people.
Totally. And it's probably like, not the whole county because there are two other
Sure,
schools in the county. But there are people who live, 10 miles away from Holton, that kind of thing, that are like coming into Holton. So it's not exactly just
sure.
in town. But yeah, and we were one of the bigger classes, which was actually really awesome. They had to hire a special teacher to come in, like an extra teacher, I guess I should say, so that they had enough for our kindergarten and first grade class. And her name was Mrs. Wilderman, and I loved her so much. She was the one I was talking about, where like there's this person whose job it is to like show you cool stuff. Like that's all she wants to do is like teach you things all day. Like it's just
Wow.
the best thing ever. School's awesome. Yeah, that was because of her. She
That'd
was
be a fun job too, I guess, if you
oh,
stop and think about it.
she had the perfect personality for it. She was very playful and yeah, had the right spirit to work with 25-year-olds. So not everybody
Yeah.
does. That's a saint right there. Yeah.
So then what happened? What did you decide to do after being one of 110 graduates in your class? What was next?
So when I was coming to the end of high school, I was really ready to just kind of be done with school and try my hand at working for a while. And
But you love school.
I
How
know,
do you?
isn't that weird? And I think a lot of it was like I didn't know. Like I had no idea. I had no good plan on
I bet you
what to
did
do.
pretty well in school, didn't you? Like you made a lot of A's.
Yes, gosh dang it.
And
Hang
so
on.
then did you feel a lot of pressure then? Like to continue making lots of A's? Like was it, I wonder if that's something that could sort of turn you away from being interested in more school. Like if it was something that, you know, that you felt pressure to perform.
Yeah, I think that could have definitely been a lot of it. And actually, there was kind of a disappointing experience at the end of high school that was one of the best things that could have happened to me, I think, which was I took my grades very seriously, which is a whole story all by itself, but like to an anxiety provoking degree. I took my grades very seriously. And the only B plus I ever got was an 89.6. And I went to the teacher and I said, will you please round this to a 90? Like, will you please give me an A? And he's like, why would I give it to you if you didn't earn it? And so that happened sophomore year. So I
Wow.
knew going through the whole high school thing, like I'm not a 4.0. Like that's not even possible to get a 4.0 in high school. And the top 10%, they they all had 4.0s. And
Mm,
the top 10%, there were 109 individuals in our class. And so what is 10% of
be 11.
109?
Yeah, 11 people.
They decided that that is not true because the 11th person is really only 90% of a person.
And that was you?
And that was me.
Oh,
Everybody
man.
else had, if I had had a 4.0, it would
Yeah.
have been an 11-way tie. And there would have been no way to distinguish who was actually in 11th place. But because I
What was
had
the
that
class?
algebra too,
Really?
yeah. And I loved
And you
math.
got
It was my favorite subject. So that's, yeah.
89.6.
Why would I
Man,
give it to you if you didn't earn it?
the margins there are just ridiculously thin. So, like, I, I have to assume that this just felt soul crushing at the time and like you'd never overcome it.
It felt like a huge injustice. Like it was
Yeah.
so unfair. Like I had tried so hard and it had been for nothing. And so when I went to college, which I did go to college, I had a completely different philosophy on grades. I'm like, nobody gives a shit what your grades are. Okay. Like, nobody cares if you get a B or an A. Like, did you graduate from college? You know, like maybe in the final sort, your GPA matters a teeny bit, but it's not
Well,
worth the effort. It's not worth the anxiety that I put
I,
myself through.
I got to tell you, I'm glad to hear you say that, and I feel much less judged because, if I ever got an 89.6 in a class, that might have been my best grade.
Oh,
No, I mean, I made the occasional A's here and there, but I made plenty of non A's for sure. So,
yeah,
yeah, I can only imagine that. Yeah, that would be, gosh, really
yeah.
kind of debilitating in a way. So,
Well, and that's why I say like it was definitely disappointing and it pissed me off at the time for sure.
good.
But it also broke me of trying so hard on such like external arbitrary metric systems. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I put in so much effort, and was the reward even worth it in the first place? If I had gotten it, I probably would have continued saying yes.
Yeah.
And because I didn't, and I had to look on the outside, and I was like, what's different between me and them? I, I no longer see it as valuable. It was very disillusioning. So for that, I'm very grateful.
So, and I'm thinking you would have, if you were in 10th grade when that happened, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
Then you'd have had a brother that was in like 8th grade, another one that was like
Ninth,
in
seventh,
6th
and
grade,
sixth.
ninth,
Yeah.
7th, and yeah, and then another one even that was younger than that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if they took anything from it, and like, did they kind of follow in your footsteps academically, or were they not quite
No,
as committed?
really. I mean, they're all very smart, very
Mm,
intelligent people, but none of them had the life or death seriousness about it that I seem to have for whatever reason. Um, and they made okay grades, but they also played a lot more sports than I
oh,
did, and that was more their thing that they really excelled at was in sports, and I fall down just standing still, so I was not ever really in sports. And so yeah, like my report card, it was like, this is where I show up. This is where I show what I'm good at, which was learning and knowing stuff. And so yeah, to have my favorite subject of all the subjects be the one that gets me the B, like it was a good moment for like really reworking some of my ego attachments to like, where does my worth come from? Is it because I get
yeah,
all A's? I had to let that go because I didn't have all A's anymore. So I had
yeah.
to get over that, which was probably really good, you know?
I mean, I'm a little bit probably biased, but I definitely agree with you. And in fact, I have a 6th grader now who I think is following. Like, it's just this year that they start getting, kind of letter grades, and I feel like my 6th grader is kind of shying away from some other activities and really focused on the academics, which is cool, but it's a little worrisome, that, that they're going to have that a similar type of experience. I don't know.
Yeah. Which, I mean, just looking at later in life, like I I have a passion for accuracy. I have like
Mm,
a commitment to quality that
mhm,
it worked so well with grades and grading and test taking and all of that. Um, Out in the real world though, that's where I say like I've like run myself off the cliff multiple times
mhm,
with like, it can't actually be perfect, and yet I'll work it to try to make it perfect. So it's more like a personality trait overall in terms of like, yes, it played out in school like that.
mhm,
But over time, like through experiences like that one where I was kind of robbed of my perfection or my illusion of perfection,
mhm.
I have slowly grown out of like trying to make it perfect or like pushing myself to make it perfect, but it emphasis on the slowly part because that was pretty good. I really like it.
And the thing that kind of drives me crazy thinking about it on your behalf is that it's all just a rounding error. I mean, 89.6 rounds to 90, and then 11 people rounds to 10% of 109. Like, come on.
Yeah.
That's just insane. But
And like,
no, I
isn't
get
that such a good metaphor though for the world?
mm,
Like the world's not fair. The world's
yeah,
not set up to like be fair to you. That's not what is
really
going on
not.
here. Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm glad I learned that on like such small arbitrary things like grades and top 10% in my high school class. Like, yeah, would it have been cool? Probably, but it
Mhm.
didn't happen. And I got a different experience out of it. And I got to think like losing it is probably even more valuable than getting it. Like when you play it out over the long term.
Wow. I'm going to write that down. Losing it is more valuable than getting it.
Sometimes, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't
that's
that make
brilliant.
sense?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That is fantastic. So I think what part of one of the things that led us down that path was that we were talking about what you did after high school, and I think you said you gave some thought to not going to college or taking a gap year. Or I don't know what
Yeah.
did you do and
Yeah.
why?
So, okay. College wasn't so much like on my radar, but about halfway through my senior year, my FFA advisor, Jason Larison, started talking to me about his suggestion that I run for state office for Kansas FFA. So for Kansas
Oh,
FFA, yeah, state office for the government. No. Gosh,
okay.
dang it. This turd is just,
Yeah, it's all good.
it is.
So FFA advisor, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so he had been a really good mentor to me through high school. Like just I could probably do a whole episode about how that guy
Yeah.
built up my self-esteem and my confidence and all of that.
Wow.
He was the one that like as I was doing public speaking in FFA, he would be the one where like I'm writing my speech and turning it into him so he can help me like critique it. I practice giving my speech and he gives me feedback on like, don't move around so much, like stop touching,
Oh, sure.
like those kinds of things. And so he had been doing that with me through all 4 years of high school. And halfway through my senior year, I hadn't ever even applied to be a chapter officer, a district officer. I like never went out for any of those kinds of leadership things. I just like didn't even try for it. And so then he's like, "Yeah, you should run for state office." And I'm like, why would I do that? Like, I was never a chapter officer. I was never a district officer. Like, what are you even thinking? And he's like, well, I'm thinking that you get interview practice. You get to sit there while they ask you 100 behavioral based interview questions, which answering all of those are just 100 little speeches that you get to
Mhm.
give.
Yeah.
And that if you get slated, if you're like top 10 in the candidates, then you get to go on stage at McCain Auditorium and give a speech in front of like 1,500 people. And I was like,
Whoa.
okay, where do I sign? Like he put it in the language. He dangled the exact carrot
Yeah.
that was going to get me to bite onto that hook. And so I ran for state office because I really wanted to give my speech on stage at McCain Auditorium.
Like the exact opposite of what most high school students would be thinking, like, I got to give a speech? No
But
way.
that's why you wouldn't do it. That's why I did it. And I think I was probably the most surprised when I actually got elected. So
Wow.
at that point, you, as a state officer, you have to attend like a post high school institution, like either go to K State or go to a community college or something. You have to go somewhere. And so I applied to K State because I was running for state office, and you have to be able to show that you're going to go somewhere. And I'm like, I'm not going to get elected, so I'm not going to go. Like, it's just not even, it's the world's smallest deal. Like, here, $35, let
Yeah.
me apply.
Oh,
And
wow.
so then I got elected to state office. And then it's like, well, K-State is the only school that I applied to because that was just so I could put something on the application. And so in August of 2006, I moved to Manhattan, Kansas, and I started K-State. And that's where I got my degree.
The capriciousness of life, right? I mean, just the decisions that are sort of almost made on your behalf by the smallest of things. That's just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, you weren't invisible, Carly. You were not invisible.
I was not. It, again, like it blew my mind to, I mean, there were 22 of us candidates, and some of them, like when you're in Kansas, you have to be either a freshman in college or a sophomore in college to run for state office. And so some of them were coming out of high school like me, and some of them had already been at college for a year. And some of those ones had run for state office the year before. So they had like already gone through the process. They had already been at school for a year. Like they just carried themselves differently, I felt like, than us high school kids. And so like going into the group, I mean, as I met them, as I like got to know them, and we spent a lot of time together over the 3 days of getting asked all the questions, it was like I just knew that I'm not even going to get to give my speech. Like if some miracle happened and I did squeak my way into the bottom of the top 10, like, and I got to give my speech, that would be radical. That would be amazing. But like I had made peace with like, there's no freaking way I'm getting above all of these people. Like, look at how awesome they are.
Yeah, that 89.6 will definitely set you up to
Like,
accept your fate for sure.
right.
So,
That like they're all better than me. And obviously I'm not gonna win. And so then the day comes where it's like the last day of convention and they're ready to announce like who's the top 10 candidates, the slate. We're going to vote on these top 10. The top six become the new state officer team. And so we're all gathered backstage. It's dark. It's like silent out there. And they're like, all right. And so your two candidates for the first position, the very first position they're naming off. And mine is the first name they read. They're like,
okay.
your candidates for 2006, 2007 state FFA Sentinel are Carly Whorton and the other person. And so at that point, our job was to step forward so that the current state Sentinel could grab a hold of both of us.
Mm-hmm. When was that picture taken? Just curious.
A few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, a few years ago, back in the long hair days.
Yeah.
Um,
Crazy long hair days.
dude, I had some of those. Um, so yeah, we had to step forward so he could grab us both and run us out onto the stage and sit us in the chairs. And so at the end of announcing the slate, there's 10 of us sitting on stage. And that's the moment where they're going to hand you the microphone and you got to get up there and give your speech.
Okay.
And so our position was going to be first to give our speech. So we had the least amount of time. They were just going to finish announcing the rest of the slate. And then one of us was going to have to stand up and talk. And she was first. And I could tell like from the time we got seated in the chairs, like she can't believe we're here. She's like having a moment of shock where she cannot believe that she's sitting in this chair right now. And I thought I had made with like, I'm not going to get on the slate. Like, I'm not going to get to do it. And yet I could believe I'm sitting in this chair. Like, I'm not so shocked I can't still remember my speech and like still get through it. She was like crying, like during her speech. She like couldn't breathe and she was very emotional during her
Yeah.
speech. And I remember the end of her turn and the beginning of my turn and like getting a hold of the microphone.
Yeah.
This is really testing patience. That's okay. It's all good. Um,
Yeah.
I can remember like in a tunnel, like one of those moments where like everything else in the world stops existing. And I was just holding the microphone and there was just the spotlight. And I just did my speech like I was born for that moment. and they count the votes and they announce later that day that I'm the winner of that election, that I won my little contest. And they told me, the lady who runs the election told me the next year when I was serving behind the scenes as like part of the nominating committee, like doing the interviews of the new officers, or the new officer candidates. She told me during that process, she's like, we counted your votes 3 times because we could not believe that someone with no leadership history came out of nowhere and got like 93% of the votes. Like, she's like, we counted them 3 times because we couldn't believe that that's what happened, but that's what
Wow.
happened. All
Dang.
because of those 2 minutes where
Yeah.
I had composure and she
Yeah.
did not. And that was the only difference. She was a fantastic person. She had
Yeah.
the way better resume. She had been chapter officer for years, district officer for years. Like, she had all these things that she had done, and she lacked composure during her 2 minutes, and I had mine. And
Yeah.
our lives went two completely different directions.
Well, it's interesting that the voters put so much weight on that 2 minutes too, you know? Like, I don't know. I mean, we've just had this whole like college football playoff nightmare for some people where, you know, the team that went undefeated, like that whole body of work wasn't recognized here in the selection process. And a team that lost a game was selected. Like, you could imagine in this process, the voters don't aren't probably given perfect clarity.
Yeah.
Do we, you know, give full weight to this 2 minutes and man, Carly's speech was really good, or are we supposed to consider the entire body of work? I don't know. It's interesting to
Yeah.
think about.
And I don't remember like what kind of a, because they had delegate packets that like had stats sheets in there
Mhm.
as far as like some information about us, but I don't remember at all like what kind of information. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't feel like I earned that. I don't feel like I did better than her, and that's why like I have this opportunity. Like, for those 2 minutes, I showed
Yeah,
up with a little bit more emotional composure, and
yeah,
it changed my life and hers.
yeah.
Like, it just blows your mind what it can come down to sometimes, as far as like I was not going to college and then I got elected. And so then, I went to college.
Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, you've identified a couple of pretty important moments, kind of events in your life where, like, the whimsical capriciousness of life, like you've really kind of brought that to the forefront for us today in a couple of ways.
I
So
feel like
I
my
think
whole
that's
life
great.
is like that, which is why I love this podcast and
Yeah,
finding out that other people have moments like that too, where
yeah.
we're really not as in control as we like to think we are. It's like life comes along and it's like, no, 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 here, here,
Yes,
put
we
your,
make plans. The Buddha smiles.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So we're getting close to an
Yeah,
hour, I think, if you can
totally.
imagine that. So I don't know. I want to hear more about then. Okay, FFA, and you probably wouldn't have gone to college, and now you do. So what you know what what then becomes of your life because of college? Like how much did that change things for you?
Yeah.
I don't know. Should we get into that, or should we wait till next time?
I'll give you one teeny story about college.
Oh yes, give us a hook,
A little, yeah,
and
like
then we'll make
the,
everybody wait.
so
Yeah, see, that's why this is your podcast. You're in charge. You
let me
still get
lay
to
this
make the
out.
decisions here.
Okay, this is so great. And this is again one of those moments where life is so much easier than we think it is. So in the midst of the running for state office process, we spent, I mean, like 12 or 14 hours a day in these holding rooms with each other while we waited our turn to go and do our interview. And
Holding rooms, were you like in handcuffs
no, but this small room
or
and there's
close?
22 of us and
Oh,
only
okay.
one person leaves at a time. So yeah, we're in close quarters. And they would bring in other people, like typically past state officers would like come in and visit. They would like come in and sit for an hour and like hang out, and people would ask questions and the person would tell stories or whatever. And I never did work up the courage to talk to any of them, but I listened to every single thing every single one of them said. And one of them just blew my mind. Her name was Sarah, and she captivated me as far as like the way she talked. She sounded exactly like I wanted to sound. She was so knowledgeable, she was so poised, she laughed, she was graceful. She just was I the pedestal just built itself right up under her. It was
Yeah.
cool. And at the end, right before she left, somebody asked her, "Hey, I meant to ask you, what is your major?" And she said, "Oh, ag econ." And I took that and I said, "Okay, that's my major, ag econ." And
Wow.
that was what I graduated in. And that's why I picked it, was because that's what she
That's
was doing. And so
amazing.
that was as easy as it was. I mean, I'm not even going to go there, but if I do go there, ag econ, oh, that would be cool. Yeah. So when I got elected, I knew what I was going to major in, ag econ. She figured it out for me. It froze up on us.
So, could you hear me that whole time that you went away?
No, I don't think so.
I wonder if it got recorded. I was just saying that we'll call this the technical difficulty that ends the episode.
Yeah.
We will we'll come back next time and we'll talk a little bit more about what it was like studying ag econ at K State. You gave us the perfect hook. We all want to learn more. So so
Oh,
yeah, I think that's a perfect ending, and
yeah.
we'll catch up with you next time.
This was so fun. You
It
made
was
this
fun.
so
I
easy
enjoyed
for
it.
me. Thank
Oh,
you.
really?
Yeah, you
Well,
did. You did such a good job. Oh,
well, it seemed pretty easy from this side too. So I guess
good.
maybe we both managed to overcome whatever that, whatever that thing was. So
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like next time be like, no, this is gonna be just another fun one like last time. So
yeah,
hopefully the
you did
nerves
great.
will, yeah, it's all
Yeah, you had no reason to be nervous at all. That was perfect.
all good. It's never as bad as you think it's gonna be. That's
No, no.
a very common lesson that I get. So
I
thank
guess the
you.
whole point of what you're doing is like introducing people to each other in a way, and like kind of getting stories out there that are interesting. And I promise you, your story is really interesting. So
Well,
I'm
thank you.
certain that people are gonna want to dig into that and catch the
Cool.
next catch the next one
Cool.
too.
Yeah, yeah, we'll come back on another one and keep on trucking with the pieces putting themselves together like they
Yeah,
still are. Basically,
that's
that's
right.
still the way it goes. So, yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it. I appreciate Will for listening and everybody else who tunes in. Take a second, like the video, leave us a comment down below. What was your favorite part, most surprising? Any of that. It's all good. We'll catch you next time. Until then, you take really good care of yourselves, and so will we.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Hello out there, and welcome back to another episode of My Grocery Adventure. My name is Carly Whorton, and I am normally the host of this podcast. Today, we are joined by a guest host, Mr. Will Katz. Will, thank you for being here.
It is my
Appreciate you.
pleasure.
Yeah. Will is doing the kind service of helping to facilitate my telling of my story. As normally I help other people's to tell their stories. So where we left off last time, as far as this is the second part of my story, was the end of high school, getting elected to Kansas FFA state office, and that being something of a fate sealing moment as a state officer, you're going to go to some type of post high school educational institution, whether that's a community college or 4 year college, didn't matter, but you got to go somewhere. And the only place that I had applied just so I could apply to state office was K State. So when I got elected, it was at that moment that I knew, okay, so I'm going to go to K State here in 2 months and start college. And that's where we left off. I'm a state officer and ready to head out into the world.
So yeah, that's just so interesting to me because as I hear you tell the tale, it's like you weren't that committed at all to the notion of college, certainly not right out of high school, and maybe not even ever from what I can tell. But this sort of strange moment. And as I recall, this comes from your kind of love of speaking in front of people,
Yeah.
like almost the weirdest thing in history, because almost every other person I know is like, I hate speaking in front of people. But you tell us this story about how you discovered that you love doing that, and then that is sort of what leads you to college
Yeah.
after all of these things. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of amazing. But I'm curious, like, how did you then decide how to spend your time at college? How did you decide what you were going to major in? What did you major in?
So I majored in agricultural economics, and that was also part of the tail end of last time's episode was
That's right.
how I chose was I happened to meet a person who I thought was so impressive, and her major was ag econ, and I was like, okay, great, I'll major in ag econ. So again, a very like easy decision, and I think easy because of what you just said of like I wasn't really that committed to it. I was like, this is something to do. I'm for sure gonna go for the year I'm a state officer, but me as a person, I don't like to start something big like that if I'm not going to finish it, get my money's worth kind of thing, like get something out of it. And so, how did I decide how to be at college? I was like, get this shit over with as fast as possible. So, I took gigantic course loads. I took summer session classes. I had, this is like another paradox within my world, but I had quite a few college credits during high school that I had taken, even though that wasn't really where I wanted to go. I just personally like to learn. So there was a Highland Community College Extension Center right there in Whorton. The classes were really cheap. A lot of them were taught like right there at the high school. A lot of them, like my junior year, I think it was, I did a 0 hour where you show up to school at like 6:30. And so your school day is just a little bit longer. Well, you could be done an hour and a half sooner, or you could just have more. And that was obviously what I was doing. So I did things like that mostly because I wanted to take the classes, not because I was like gearing up for something big. But so between the college credits that I had during high school, and then as fast and as big as my course loads were, I finished college in 3 years. And so at 20, graduated with my ag econ bachelor's degree.
Wow. That's amazing. I think I graduated when I was 27, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
way more common.
So,
I mean, like
yeah.
Jeannie took a bunch of years. Like, there's way more stories
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that are way closer to that of like, and it was just so it's again such a paradox because I just really didn't want to be there. Like, I wasn't interested in like partying or going to football games, or like I didn't join a sorority or like anything. Like, I didn't do anything extracurricular. I took my classes, I did my work, and I got the hell out of there. But at
So
the end,
you were there to learn stuff and get a degree then, which is
basically,
maybe what it's really all about.
well,
I think
I
that,
don't know if that's true.
yeah, true. For some people, it's not. I just think that notion is really fascinating where, like, because you're not super committed to it, because it's not very high stakes for you, like that allows you to excel. You're not putting, pressure on yourself. It's not every exam isn't, I must pass this or my family will disown me. It's probably actually really conducive to learning stuff.
Well, and I think too, like the term is like first generation college student or something like that, like where your family hasn't gone to college
Yes.
before. And so
Right.
they don't know.
Yes.
They don't, I mean, they just, oh, you're doing that. Okay, cool. And my disillusionment coming out of high school with my like 3.91 GPA I worked so freaking hard for. Dude, I'm pretty sure I had a 3.0 GPA in my bachelor's because I just I studied enough. I
Mhm.
calculated like what score do you need on the final to keep a B in the class? And then I'd let myself get like a D on the final or something. Like yeah, I just like didn't care. So my 3.0 GPA in college was so much easier. Like the amount of effort that it takes to go from a B to an A is a lot. And the amount of effort that it took to get a B was like, it made it a lot easier considering I was taking such huge course loads. I wasn't trying to get A's at all. I didn't care about that.
But I happen to know that you also went to grad school because I got at least a little future sketch here.
Yeah.
What possessed you to do that? I mean,
Yeah.
because again, your undergraduate career doesn't sound like it was sort of the kind that we would earmark for future grad students of America.
Right. Like it was again, it's just my story's kind of full of paradoxes. It's like a Plinko, like on The Price is Right,
Mm,
I think is where they play Plinko.
yeah,
And like the thing kind of
yeah,
falls like this. Like that's like my trajectory. It feels like I don't get to
yeah.
know what's coming while I'm doing the thing. I just do the thing. So and this is the reason I say, I don't know if rushing through your undergrad is the best idea there is, because when I'm 20 years old and walking at graduation, I was like, I'm a child. Like, I'm not ready to go out in the world. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I still have no clue. When I was getting to the end of my undergrad and like looking at options and what am I going to do next, um, it's like I did apply for jobs. This is also the spring of 2009. So the economy had
Okay.
just hit the toilet like less than a year
Terrible.
ago.
Yeah.
And the job market is not exactly bustling at this point. And I did get a few offers, but I'm pretty sure at least two of them were for grain merchandising positions, which is basically like a stock
Oh.
market broker for corn kind of thing. Like you're buying corn and
Mm-hmm.
selling corn, like wheat, oats, like whatever the commodity is. And I just like could not picture myself doing that, let alone they wanted to start you at like 35K and you got to move to the middle of nowhere, Iowa. And I'm like, this is not where my life is headed. I can tell you that right now. So the other
Wow.
option was unfolding kind of alongside this job hunt was my advisor in undergrad. Actually, I just did an episode. This one wouldn't have aired when this one is, but it'll be coming up. So there's an episode coming up where she talks about there was no college advisor. And because of that, she took classes for like 6.5 years before she realized like she's not headed towards anything. And it's like, if there
Yep.
had been an advisor, maybe I would have, been a little bit more on the ball with like, what am I actually doing here? She was just taking what was interesting. And at K State, they did an awesome job. I mean, we had an advisor that you met with like every semester the whole time. So I felt very supported in that way. And going into my senior year, he was the one that was like, have you thought about grad school? Is that something that you would be interested in exploring? And so just like, Larison in high school is like putting this idea in my head of like, you should run for state office. Like, here's my advisor in college being like, have you thought about grad school? And I'm like, oh, well, not really, but what's that like? Like, what does that entail? And what he told me was that if you apply, like we're far enough out right now where you can apply and actually get a position. So it's like a paid position to go to grad school. And I'm like, what? Like you get paid to be a student? Yeah, you do. And like maybe you're working as a research assistant or maybe you're working as like a teaching assistant, but you're in grad school and you're making money being a grad student. And then maybe that money basically covers your tuition. So you're kind of breaking even on the deal. It's kind of hard to live on that if you're not also taking loans for tuition or something is helping you pay for that. But so that was like, I didn't even know that was a thing that existed.
Mm,
And so that was really
yep.
eye-opening. And I was like, all right, so like, how would that work? And he started talking to me about, you basically get matched up with a major professor. Like who's going to oversee your graduate work, your project, whatever it is that you're going to do for your thesis. And he introduced me then to Dr. Vincent Aminar Boadu. That's my best.
Oh, you know what?
You know
I
him.
actually know him.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know what? It's so funny watching all of your various podcasts come through because either I know like half of the people, or at least I know of them
Yeah.
fairly well. And
Yeah.
so Dr. Vincent, I wouldn't say I know him very well, but I met him probably in the early 2000s. He
Oh,
was kind of hosting kind of this really early developmental model of something that's like 1 million cups is. And he was, so he was bringing people to Manhattan and putting them in meetings like, are you an investor? Are you an entrepreneur? Like you'd wear different color name tags based on that. I can't remember what it was called, but it was
mhm.
very far ahead of his time. And
Yeah.
I was very impressed by it. So, yeah.
Dude, I'm
So
so
hopefully
glad
you're going
you
to go
know
on and
him.
say really nice things about Dr. Vincent because
He changed my life. Like
great.
the how I would summarize him and the role he played in my life is like he taught me how to think. He
Really?
taught me how to think. And I had
Well,
not learned
that's high
that yet.
praise.
I had not learned that yet in my life at
Yeah.
all. Like, and
Well, I don't want to let you go on because I really want to recognize before you do this notion of being a first generation college student. I don't think you and I have talked about that much. I don't think we talked about it much on the last episode. But my opinion is that like there's literally nothing that changes personal and family trajectories nearly as much as being that first generation college student. Like it takes so much. Like you kind of have to get outside of a paradigm within your family, like the only thing that you've known, the only thing that you've seen. To do that is just extraordinary. And I know quite a few people that are in that first generation college graduate category, and
mhm.
like every one of them is pretty extraordinary. So
Yeah.
I got to give you some credit there. And then I could be completely wrong, but I feel like a fairly high percentage of those folks say, well, now that I'm here, I might as well do grad school too.
I it was
And
the
that kind of sounds like what you did. It
yeah,
was just, okay, since I'm here, I
yeah.
might as well.
I mean, so I met Dr. Vincent and he had a project going on with USDA that was like already underway. He had already gotten the grant. They had three grad students who started on the project the year before I did, and the funding was for four, but they couldn't find a fourth. And so then here I come along the next year, and he's still got this money to pay for his fellow to go through grad school and do the project. And basically, instead of having like a blank slate for my thesis, I would have um, like the beginnings of what they were working on. And so my thesis was kind of falling under an umbrella that was already underway. And so, yeah, that was it was a life-changing experience to stay there. And really it came down to okay, well, you can go move to the middle of nowhere, Iowa and buy and sell corn for 35,000 a year, or you can stay at grad school for like I think the fellowship was even more than the College of Ag paid their grad students. It was like 21,000 a year to stay and do grad school. And so I'm like, I'll keep living like a college student. I'll maybe
Yeah.
branch out a little more socially during grad school than I did during undergrad because I feel still like I'm just not ready to step into the world like on my own. Which, as we'll see, I had a really big definition of what that meant to do that. But yeah, so grad school came right on the
So
heels
then
of undergrad. What's that?
did you then step out a little bit more into the social world in grad school?
Oh my gosh. I say that I made my first friends in grad school. Like my
Okay.
first real friends where it wasn't based on like seventh grade, we're gossiping about the same kids, like these were friends where like we had shared interests. Like we loved math and statistics and talking about the microeconomy and talking about how that translated into the global sense and like, how old is the economy and how does that cause it to grow and evolve over time, like newer economies versus really established economies. So like these were people that
Ooh.
like I could freaking talk to and about the things
Hmm.
that I've been, thinking about in my mind and never found a group of people where we're sitting around for hours at a time having these conversations. And so I felt like I kind of found my people a little bit in grad school. And I did, especially the second year. I was kind of like the resident gatherer. I would like go around to all the cubicles and be like, we're going for frozen yogurt at 4. Who's coming? And then there's like 20 people at the frozen yogurt place. And I'm just sitting around like, you guys are all here because I invited you. I built this and like look at they're all laughing and they're talking and this is like the coolest thing I've ever done. It was awesome.
You talking about that place on campus, or are you talking about a different place? No, that
No,
was
it
just ice
was
cream, wasn't it?
it was a froyo, what was it called? Like orange something?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
orange.
that's like 12 years ago at this point, but
I know what
yeah,
you're talking
it
about.
was
Yeah.
like over by what's that? My geography of Manhattan is terrible.
Well, it's better than mine, I promise you.
Near to the mall, I think ish.
Okay.
Like over on that side of
Okay.
Manhattan is where this place was. But yeah, anyways, so especially the second year, um, yeah, I was way into the social side and the people that I was hanging out with were my grad school people. And most of our hanging out was sitting around with beers or wine and talking about economics. So nerding out together socially. And it was awesome.
Orange leaf.
Yes. Yes. That is it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
We
had
were,
to I had
we
to
went there a
Google it
lot.
over here. So
Thank
yes.
you. That was
And so friends not just by proximity but by interest. That's actually
yeah.
kind of a fascinating concept. Um, yeah. So second year grad school, whole new world, whole new
Yeah.
way of relating socially.
Yeah.
Sounds incredibly life changing.
I don't know if I would have been able to like go forward and do what came next if the second year of grad school hadn't been that. Because like the first year was very similar to college where I studied and I did my work and I mean I had like two sometimes three jobs, like little part-time jobs, um, to like kind of make ends meet. But yeah, I mean, I was just like doing my work. And it's that
Mhm.
workaholic side where you really have to try, like at least I do, to like carve out space where you're going to socialize, where like this is not work time, like this is time for
Mhm.
friends. And is there time for friends? It's largely a question of did you make time for friends? And that was what changed was like if I'm going to have friends and spend time with them, I need to start making that a priority. Like if you don't prioritize it, it's not going to just happen. They're not going to come into your apartment while you're studying and like be like, "Hey Carly, want to come to dinner with us?" Like that's not realistic. So yeah, my
Mhm.
priorities had to kind of shift, and that was I made like a close friend, Ashley, who started in the grad program the same time I did. She was from Arkansas, and by the beginning of summer, at the end of our first year, she and I were pretty close. And so we were spending a lot of time together and like pulling others into that a lot. So yeah, it was, again, I just healing in a way to see that, like, look at you can make friends, you can do this.
Yeah. And so you say that that's kind of foundational to what came next. And obviously, what came next was not trading, commodities, corn and beans at
No,
some exchange in Iowa. Though I gotta tell you, Carly, that actually sounds kind of fun to me. Like being
you probably would have loved
like a
it.
commodities,
Yeah.
like a commodities market maker. That
It,
actually it's
it,
an
yeah, that's what
important
you're doing.
role. Yeah.
Heavy into logistics. You're
Hmm.
constantly, trying to buy low, sell high, like
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
just move it around. And
Yeah.
it was one of those kinds of jobs where like I knew I would have been able to do it, but I
Sure.
could not see it being fun for me. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't see how it was
I
going to be
get you.
fun. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I just was like this can't be it. And then the grad school thing happened and it was kind of an easy choice to take that route.
Oh yeah. I gotcha. So So year two of grad school, what comes after that?
So, hmm, it was basically the last few months of grad school, same as the end of undergrad. I had in my mind that, like, I'm looking across the entire US for job opportunities. I want to find the best job that I can. I don't really care where it is. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to like make it happen. Like for me, stepping out into the world was always about going somewhere where nobody knew me and building a reputation for myself that was based on what I contributed and not what had, my press, what's that called? Predecessors. Like
Predecessors.
I don't want my reputation based on them. I want it based on what I do. And to do that, you got to wipe the slate clean where nobody knows you. And so that's what I wanted to do.
That's a brave notion. I mean, I honestly don't think that I've ever looked at it that way. Like I've always sought to get from one thing to the next thing by retaining connections. And it's not that I'm like afraid to start over or afraid to be judged on, you know, whatever the content of my character, so to speak. Like that doesn't bother me at all. But I just think that that's kind of unique. I don't think you look at that the same way that everybody does.
Hmm.
I could be wrong, but I think that's unique.
I don't know why, but it just always felt really important to me that I mean, I think maybe because I am so proud of my family. Like they are so incredibly impressive. And like kind of how in your episode you were describing about like there's a huge difference between a first generation business starter and like a
Mm-hmm.
second generation business inheritor, right? Like
Yeah.
the world's biggest
Mm-hmm.
difference. And so I knew on my legacy, like my predecessors, there's a lot to inherit,
Yeah.
a lot. And I could, just carry on the legacy that was started before me, or I could go start one myself. And I felt so much more resonance with being that person than the inheritor, which not to say that I
Okay.
have not greatly benefited from my family and everything that came before me. It's a powerful foundation
Sure.
to get to stand on
Yeah.
as I do what I'm doing. But yeah, it felt really important that I kind of break apart at least for a while and
Okay.
prove to myself, probably more than anybody else, that I can do it all by myself. I don't know why. That was just necessary that I know that.
Okay. Okay. That makes it that contextualizes a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what was it? What did you find? What did you do?
So, this is what another one of those times where one, I think as we make big life decisions, it really matters like what's most important to you. And at the time, money was not unimportant to me. It was decently motivating. Um,
Sure.
and so I had applied for lots of different jobs and went to interviews kind of all over the country, which was pretty cool. To have like, expenses paid to bring you to wherever they are and like have your interview and stuff. Um, and so I ended up applying at a software company that was located in Dallas, Texas. That was one of the places. And another of the places that I applied was at Cargill, I believe. Just there in the second, I couldn't remember if it's Cargill or Coke. It's one of them. And it was in Wichita, and that's where they wanted me to go. And both interviews went great. The software company, like a week later, sends me an offer like, hey, we want you to come here. Here's your starting salary. Here's what it would be. Here's your start date. Accept or reject by this date. And clear up until the accept reject, I didn't have any other offers that were better than that, either by money or location. And it was only after I accepted, and then maybe even like 2 or 3 weeks later, the Wichita position would have started me like $15,000 more. And I think
Oh.
if I had gotten that offer first or had them side by side, there's a decent chance that I might have taken the higher paying offer. And
So wait,
yeah,
just a second here. So you got an offer, you
yes,
accepted it, and
yes.
then 2 weeks later you got an offer that you otherwise might have accepted. Because I got to tell you, I think, I mean, how very 2009 of you. Because I think in 2023, the vast majority of folks would most likely just say, "Well, okay, now I'll take the better offer." But you chose not to do that.
Like you're saying they would cancel accepting the other offer?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, I think a lot of
Really?
people would do that.
I
Oh,
still can't
yes.
imagine doing that.
Well, I mean, put it to you this way, like if somebody asked me career advice about that, here's what I would tell them. Software company in Dallas gives you an offer. That's really nice. You accepted it. That's great. I promise you, if you work there 60 days and things aren't working out for them, like they'll let you go in a split hot second. They won't even bat
That's
an
a
eye. They won't
fact.
even think twice about it.
Yeah,
So if you think you might rather have this other job, just take it. You don't actually owe them anything. You didn't sign on for an indentured servitude. You accepted a job. That's all you did. So yeah, that's really
wow.
interesting.
It is
And now
really
you're like
interesting.
the
And
things
now
that our
I'm
lives hinge
so,
upon.
well, exactly. I'm so freaking glad that I took the bigger leap and went to
Yeah.
Dallas. Like, it would have been so much easier to do what I did moving to Wichita. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would have been like 2.5 hours from where I grew up. And Dallas was an 8 hour drive from where I grew
Yeah.
up. Um, Not that I knew people in which I guess I did know some people that were living in Wichita at that time, but Dallas, like I knew no one. And so yeah, there's lots of reasons why I'm glad I was oblivious to the fact that I had the option to like cancel the first one and take the second one. Cause yeah, that well, and I remember too being like even at the time, like that $15,000, what is that really worth? Because the software company told me in the interview, the second interview, that like we promote on pretty much every year. Like every year to 2 years, like you're going to get promoted, you're going to get rotated to another team, you're going to have like a whole new job basically every couple years and kind of either get promoted within your team or move to a different team. So like very changeable setting is what they were doing. And the other one, the higher paying one, they said that within 3 to 5 years, you'll be eligible to be considered for a promotion.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the other thing that, like, I mean, yes, it was more money, but I remembered them saying that. And I was really excited at the thought of like every year you get to like, it's just like school. You get to like go to the
Yeah.
next thing and go to the next thing and go to the next thing. So that appealed to me too. And the starting pay was not bad by any means. Um, and it was Dallas. It's like the
Yeah.
South, like warm and no snow, very little snow.
Right. Very
So
little.
yeah, there was a lot to be excited for. And so it was, gosh, it all happened like at the very end, moving out of Manhattan, because I was the state convention coordinator for Kansas FFA for the last few years that I lived in Manhattan.
Oh
So
my
like
goodness.
coordinating the 80 volunteers that put on the FFA as like kind of the liaison between the main lady and like all the volunteers. And
Mm.
so I did that, and convention happens like right at the end of May, and my job started June 6th. So it was like convention was done Friday at like 6 p.m. and Saturday morning I woke up and drove to Dallas, and Monday morning I started work.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a lot. And I moved
Yeah.
myself to Dallas in like a different trip with my mom and my brothers, like the week before convention. So I had
Yeah.
like dumped all my stuff in my apartment and then came back for convention and then went back and started my job. Yeah, it was mm, that drive to Dallas, man. I The first time it was fun. Like when we moved my stuff, I was like, this is awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Saturday morning, when like I'm done with convention, I'm like done with Manhattan. and now I'm going to move to a different state and like start a whole new book of my life. Like I
Mhm.
cried for like the first 3 hours, like bawled like a baby about like my first friends. Like, and now I'm like a year later after finally meeting friends, like now I'm going to leave them all behind and go off on some different
Yes.
thing. And like, this is so
It's
freaking
funny you
hard.
say that because that's part of what would be so hard for me.
Oh God, it was
Like,
hard. It was devastating.
yeah,
It's
I just,
heartbreaking. I
yeah,
mean, you try to
yeah.
stay in touch with people, and I did a little bit. But
Mhm.
that's hard to like have a whole life here and they have a whole life there and there's no proximity. I mean,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So,
Man, try it before the era of social media, even harder.
well, and yeah, at that point, I think there was quite a bit of like we're all friends on Facebook, and that was basically
Sure.
the extent to which I kept
Yeah.
in touch, with those
I,
friends.
I
But
suppose that that's sort of a double edged sword because, on the one hand, yes, it's true, you're probably not going to completely lose touch with those folks and have no idea what's going on with their lives. But on the other hand, I think that that doesn't promote like a true connection in a lot of ways either. So
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. It was,
Fascinating.
well,
So,
go ahead.
well, I was going to jump forward and just say, so you're in Dallas now, and you're basically starting over again.
Yeah.
And you tell me what you were going to tell me, but then of course I think we'd all like to hear more about what that looked like.
Yeah. Well, and so at the software company that I started
Mhm.
with, they had a model for employees where everybody starts in this one team. And when you like the customer service team, where you're handling inbound calls, you're trying to help users of the software navigate the software to do what they need to do in the software. And the software itself,
Makes sense.
of like what it
Makes
is.
sense because then you learn it too. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why everybody has to start there is like first you need to learn like how does the system even work? What's it for? What are the people who are needing to log in there and do stuff? Like why do they need to do that? So that's where you start and you spend anywhere from like 6 months to about 18 months on that team before they rotate you into other areas of the company based on the potential that you're showing. They may put you on like a client development team where you're doing more sales and prospecting, or they may move you to a technical team where you're doing more work on the software. But everybody is pretty much starting in customer service with very few exceptions. And so
Okay.
that job, like the job itself was to answer the incoming calls. Your whole responsibility, 9 hours a day, mandatory overtime that they did pay you for those 5 hours overtime, 9 hours a day, you answer the phone and you talk on the phone. And when you're not answering the phone, you're making outbound phone calls on behalf of the client development teams. So either you're making a call or you're receiving a call for 9 hours a day. And I am
Mm.
one of the most introverted people I've ever met that's like functioning. So the thought of talking on the phone for 9 hours a day, I say that because it basically killed any desire I had to like really keep in touch with my friends, to like really call them and, spend an hour catching up with
Mm.
them on the weekend. I'm like, kill me. I don't
Mm.
want to spend a single minute on the phone when I'm not at work because I already get 45 hours a week of being on the phone and it's slowly killing me. So to do any more than that was
Ah,
just not realistic.
I'm not the same. I'm fairly extroverted, but to me, like that just sounds like a massive energy expenditure. Like at the end of that 9 hour day, I would just be shell. I wouldn't want to do anything.
That first year in Dallas, like, well, and I guess the first like 3 months, two months solid, you're in the classroom, and the third month you're between the classroom and starting to be answering the phone, that sort of thing. The first couple months, you're at school. You're at school to learn this software, and I freaking loved it. I was like top of my class, acing all the tests, whatever. Like That actually is a funny little story because they had like a 90-day review basically where exactly like what you said, if you're not performing, here's the door. And like you just
Mhm.
moved yourself to Texas for no reason. And best of luck. Like they cut loose several people and they told us they were going to. So, I mean, there you go. But in my 90-day review, I told them, like, they were like, do you have any feedback on the training program that you just completed? And I was like, well, if anything, it's pretty slow paced. You know, maybe you could speed it up a little bit. Maybe it doesn't need
Wow.
to be 3 months. Maybe it could be like 6 weeks. Like, I felt like it dragged out quite a bit as far as like the repetition and the how many days do we need to talk about the exact same thing before we can move on. And my trainer, he was like, well, next time you feel that way, gosh dang it, that was
Well, it
I
did that last time too.
I can do that. Turn that back on. Okay.
Okay.
I figured out why it was, and I definitely was doing it again just now. It's when I touched the little thing.
Uh,
Can't touch the thing. Stop
oh,
touching the thing. Okay.
no
Um,
thing touching. Yes.
yeah, no thing touching. No thing touching. Um, where was I? Do you remember?
So your trainer, you were talking
Yes.
about how you
Yes.
thought the training was slow.
Yeah. And he was like, well, next time you feel that way, how about instead of wishing the school bus would go ahead and go, how about you turn around and help other people put their seatbelts on? Because until everybody's seatbelt is on, we can't move forward. And
That's a great response.
that has stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I can't even believe that
Yeah.
like he had to tell me that because one of my favorite jobs throughout college was working as a tutor. I tutored
Mm.
statistics for 2 years, and that was so fun for me. And so, yeah, when he told me that, that planted a seed in my mind of, okay, now I'm like done with the training program and I'm hitting the floor. And like, I mean, we got ranked every week. You got like a list of the stats of like how many calls did you take? How many calls did you make? Like, and now everybody is ranked and who's at the top and who's at the bottom. And like, this is totally
Wow.
transparent, published every single week. And I was often in the top few at the beginning because that's just how I am. It's like I'm working the whole time, but it was killing me.
Mhm.
And so very early on, it started happening where like I would be listening in between calls and I could hear somebody being like, "Oh, training manager, huh?" And like that's a really complicated tool that like hardly anybody uses, so you almost never have to go in there. And they're like, "Well, hang on just a second. Let me see if I can find somebody to help me." And I would like put myself on not ready and be like, "I can help you. I know training manager." And so then I would go over to their desk and like talk them through their call and like support them as they're like helping with this person needing to use training manager or whatever. And so I
Wow.
started doing more and more of that. Word got around. Like that person comes back to me then next time they get a training manager call or OQ or TQ or like these are all the tools that were like the really complicated ones that almost nobody used. And so they basically created a position for me that they had never had before, which was OQTQ training manager, subject matter expert. So that meant that if I wasn't on the
Ooh.
phone, somebody else could come and get me and help me. And my stats were no longer on the list. They no
Well,
longer
I was just going to ask,
what my stats
like, if that, I was just going to ask, did that mean that your performance somehow looked worse? But
were. No,
apparently, at least they were
because
good
I
enough to
was
see through that. So
that's why they
good.
made me a SME so that they could take me out of the pure like judging me on my rank on the stats. Like,
A
here are my
SME, a
stats.
subject matter expert. Okay,
Yes,
gotcha.
yes, yes. And so after that, like I was the first one of those that they had. And then there were pretty quickly, there were two or three other people who were really good at that same set of tools. And so now we're all that. And then as we get rotated out of customer service and move on with our journey within the company, they put other people in those positions, and now they have like 10 different kinds of
Oh,
SME
wow.
that you could be. And it's like a normal thing that you would specialize in a specific thing and you would help everybody else. So
Oh,
that
cool.
all came about because I knew that it was going to hurt my stats to like take time off the phone to go help somebody else, but like I couldn't take it like being on the phone 100% of the time I was there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? Let me fall to the middle of the pack. I'm going to do something that makes me not want to like go home and never come back. So I made it enjoyable for myself, and almost immediately I had a really cool supervisor at that time. Almost immediately, like within a month, they created that role for me because my stats looked like crap, but he
Mhm.
saw like she's at everybody's desk helping them to get good stats. We can't punish her for this, so let's call it something and let her off the hook. And they did. So that was cool.
Well, that's at least somewhat enlightened, I guess. I mean, I certainly have been in, cultures and in institutions where the effort to help others would be surely penalized and not rewarded.
Yeah.
So that's a
Well,
good
and they
thing.
certainly didn't invite me to do this. They
Right.
they were sharing the message, stats, 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 stats. They're
Yeah.
rewarding the highest ones. Those numbers, they sort them into tiers, and you either get a 1, a 2, or a 3 on your evaluation, and that's tied directly to your bonus.
Mm,
And all that
yeah.
is are you in the top third on average for your stats? Like that's all they were looking at. And I was like, you know what? Take my bonus. I'm going to have to quit soon if I don't find something that's helping me
Yeah.
to survive this because being on the phone the whole time is not working for me. So the
Sure.
last 4 months or so that I was there in that customer service role, I was there for like 10 months before I got sent to client development. But the last 4 months, I mean, bottom third of the stats every single time. I was almost never on the phone. I was almost always at somebody else's desk helping them with the
Mm-hmm.
call they were taking, which was, yeah, I'm a teacher. That's perfect for me.
That's what happens when you're a SME, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like in the school part, in the training part at the very beginning, it was like, right, like I was just soaking it up. Like I didn't need the repetition that was built into the training program. I got it the first time they showed it to us, and I remembered like,
Sure,
oh,
sure.
that's how that works. And then they spent 3 more days making sure you got it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
terrible. But yeah, so for whatever reason, learning software was a skill that like I didn't know I was good at that, but
Right.
I am. Like you give me a tour and
Well,
I
that's
can remember what's in there.
I think that's a theme you have demonstrated in multiple occasions in multiple situations that like us, if it's a skill to learn things, that you have demonstrated that skill. Like whatever somebody would want you to learn, even if it was how to be a market maker for corn and
I could
beans,
have learned
you
that.
could probably learn that skill.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could have, but I
So,
chose not
so
to.
you, right.
Yeah.
So you spent 10 months doing that thing that everybody did.
Hmm.
And then it was time to move on to another adventure there.
Yeah.
So,
And they ask you, like, what team, where do you want to go? If you had like your top three picks of where do you want to go? And I listed my top three of where I wanted to go. And out of all the teams, probably my last choice was the one that they put me on. So,
oh,
which is like, again, just like the whole, did you move to Dallas or did you move to Wichita? I'm so glad I moved to Dallas. I didn't know at the time like what all of that was going to mean, but I would have picked these other teams and had that experience, but they gave me this one. And I'm so glad that they gave me that way. It opened up like the next several years opened up because of being on Team Canada. So I was on their Canadian operations team. I worked with
oh,
their
okay.
Canadian clients. I prospected for new businesses within Canadian companies. When I traveled to go meet with my clients, I went to Canada. That was the
Ooh,
first time I had ever left the country. Was the reason I had to get a
nice.
passport was because they put me on Team Canada. That was like step number
Wow.
one is, do you have a passport? No. Okay, well, you better get one because it takes a while and we'll be sending you sooner than later. So Yeah,
Wow.
almost within the first couple months, I was going to Calgary, Alberta, is where most of the oil and gas clients are located in Canada. And that's where their second office opened was in Calgary. So their main headquarters was in Dallas, and then they had an office in Calgary. So I worked out of the Calgary office. I was on Team Canada for 2 years and traveled varying degrees during that time. But at least, I mean, for the 2 years, I would say I went to Canada like at least once a month. And there were several months where I would come home for the weekend and go back the next week and come home for the weekend and go back the next week and come home for the weekend and go back. And like for the whole month, I would just be in
Wow.
Canada, except for getting to come home on the weekends. And the only reason they let me do that was because it was like one week I'd be in Montreal. And then the next week I'd be in Toronto. And then the next week I'd be in Vancouver. And so it, they let me come home because I was going to go back to a different place since I had to travel anyway. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's a lot.
it was a lot. And much like being on the phone, it's a huge energy expenditure
Yeah.
to not be at
Yeah.
home. Like, I'm a homebody, and I didn't really know
Sure.
that until after those 2 years of Team Canada and being back and
Mm.
forth between Dallas and Canada. It was cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, I wouldn't trade that time for anything, but I don't think I would ever live like that again, where I'm on the road
Yeah.
that much.
That would be hard for sure.
Yeah.
So if you were first generation college graduate, I wonder if you're also like first passport holder, one of the first passport holders and international
Um,
travelers in your family.
Technically, no. My dad, he sells and services milking equipment. We talked about that on the last
Right.
episode.
Hmm.
And
I
he got
watched that video, by the way. That was insane.
the robot milker.
That's so cool. Yes.
Freaking awesome, right? Like,
Yeah, it
there you
is.
go. A robot
Mhm.
milking a cow. It doesn't look exactly what I had pictured in my head the first time I heard robot milking a cow. I was picturing much more of like a human looking robot, but it's a robot milking a cow. So uh,
Yep, it is.
yeah, so he got hired. He bid a job and got hired to do a job building a parlor in Santo Domingo, which is in the Dominican Republic. And so
Okay.
that job took, I'm going to say like just over a year. And he came home like maybe once or twice in that time while he was doing that job. So he got his passport and then
Ooh,
he went there
yeah.
and then he came home several months later and then went back for several months. And then, yeah, that was the most gone he ever was
Okay.
doing that job, but that was basically what he did was like bid these big jobs and then go on location and work 18 to 20 hours a day and 7 days a week and get the job done. That still took months at a time, usually, that he would be gone. And then he
Wow.
would come home
Okay.
for a little while and then go to the next one. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he did technically have a passport and he went there and he
Okay.
learned Spanish
Very
a
good.
little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So worldly traveler. But yeah,
Yeah.
nobody else. And if he hadn't had that job, I mean, he wasn't traveling for leisure by any means. So
Sure. Right.
yeah, yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
So Team Canada, 2 years. You were there for longer than that, though. I mean, because that only gets us up to what, 2011, somewhere in that range,
Well,
2012.
I graduated from grad school in May of 2011. So I started at the software company June of
Oh, okay.
2011. So yeah, we're up to, 3 years later, 2014
Okay.
ish.
So
So,
what else is going on in your life at this time?
well, it was right around then. It was while I was still traveling for Team Canada that I met somebody that I got into a relationship with, and um, we ended up getting engaged and we're actually going to be married. And kind of that was all happening behind the scenes of us working together. He worked at the job. There were 500 people that
Oh,
worked at the job, but he was
okay.
one of them. That's how I met him, which makes a lot of sense when you look at my social life. It's like she only works and goes to
Yep.
her apartment. Where's she going to meet anybody anyway? Um,
I
so
can
yeah,
relate. Yep.
yeah, that makes sense. Um, but yeah, it didn't work out. And actually that's what flashed in my mind was I canceled my wedding before it happened. And when you said, why didn't you just cancel the job offer that you accepted and like take the better one? And I'm like, I can't imagine accepting an offer and then not like follow through on it. I said that like
Okay.
30 minutes ago.
You
And now
did say
here we
that
are
30 minutes
to
ago.
this part of the story. And this is why Carly is just one giant paradox because I was
Okay.
engaged for maybe 8 months. And then 6 weeks before the wedding, I basically told him that we can't get married in 6 weeks. I didn't break up with him. We owned a house
Okay.
together. I just said, like, this cannot become permanent in 6 weeks. We're not ready for that. And that was based on my assessment of the relationship. And within a few weeks after that conversation, the relationship had dissolved. He bought me out of the
Oh my
house. I was
goodness.
back on my way. So that happened behind the scenes of some of my best years at work, which I think were part of where I got the confidence to do that, where I was loving my job at that point.
Mhm.
These were my favorite years of like what came after Team Canada was 2 years in a role called CDQA, Client Development Quality Assurance. So you're still working on the client development team, you're working with the clients, and my role of CDQA was for our Team Canada, Team Australia, Team UK, and Team New Zealand. And so those were my clients that I handled the liaison role between those international clients and our software development team. So, like, if they
Did you get
needed
to go
updates,
to Australia,
oh, yeah,
or did you
yeah,
get? You did?
yeah, and New Zealand,
Fun. Okay.
yeah,
Cool.
on the company's dime. Like,
Yes.
dude, traveling where somebody else is paying for it is way better than traveling on your own
Yeah.
money.
Way better.
Way better.
Yep.
Yeah, so I did get a lot of opportunities to do that. And that came out of my time on Team Canada, that like knowing the system and being so good at knowing the complicated parts of the system, they knew that about me. And that was why they transitioned me to Team Canada. I didn't know this at the time, but within 6 months, they had me leading the account that had like the most complicated data transfer with our company, like between our company and their company. They were receiving like thousands of data points out of our system into their system every day. And then every week they would get more data points. And every month there was different data points. And this file transfer was happening every day. And they wanted it rebuilt from the ground up. And so they come get me out of customer service and put me on Team Canada, give me 6 months to get my feet under me, and then put me in charge of this account. And that's what I did in like the year and a half that I was on Team Canada. Was I managed like all of these super complicated accounts where they are really integrated into our system. It's not just the typical like, here's your invoice, do you need anything? Can we pull any reports for you? Like, no, they have heavy demands on the company that I'm working for, and they need somebody who knows the system as well as possible. So after managing those like data transfer rebuilds and like other accounts that had stuff like that going on, that's when they put me in the CDQA role. And I was also one of the very first ones of those that they had ever had, as far as like people who were working with the client teams, but they are software people. And so that was like the best time I had at ISN, was like still getting to be in business meetings with business people where we're talking about business outcomes and like the business purposes behind why do they need a report that says this, and this. They need it because their gate person needs to be able to check that this number is right before they open the gate and let somebody come on site. So like I wanted to be in that conversation, but then when I went home and was with the software developer guys, they're like, okay, well, we need to know what to name this column. We need to know, do you want any spaces under that? Do you like what, they need it designed. They need somebody to tell them like what code to write. And so
Oh,
I got
sure.
to absorb the business needs and then write requirements that got given to the software developers of like, here is specifically how you guys are going to write what this client needs. And I'm going to see if I can find it. There was a meme that the guy who was in charge of the software developers always used to share about basically the problem with losing things in translation. It's like the client asks for this, and this is what the person hears. And so this is what the person says. And then this is what gets built. And it's like nothing like what the client originally wanted. I'll see if I can find it.
Mhm.
I'll put it on the screen if I did.
So that's
Yeah.
very interesting because just hearing you talk about this, it's obvious how like you it was important to you and you excelled at it and it was a good time. Like just even hearing you talk about it now, and that seems like such a useful skill.
Yeah.
Um,
Translator, basically.
tr- Translator from business to the tech folks. Yeah, that's
Yes.
really really important. I wish I had one of those,
Yeah.
that followed me around and could translate stuff a little bit. But um,
It's
so this is
rare,
going
I
on
found.
at the same time you're in this relationship that appears to be headed towards marriage, and then it's not. So it seems to me, when I look at my own life and the lives of those around me, these periods of change often line up with each other. And so I guess in my head, I'm sitting here wondering, is that the case? Like, was there some, like, was there a change in the business thing that led to this change in the relationship status? Or did a change in the relationship status then lead to a change in what you were doing at work?
Mm.
Or are these things not related? Because obviously you're not there doing that anymore.
Right. Yeah, how that position ended is a moment that I think we've heard a couple times in the My Grocery Adventure series, but the I think the way that they relate is that I was loving my work, and as we've heard, work is a very big part of my life, and so that meant I was loving almost all of my life. And if I had been miserable at work, I probably wouldn't have noticed how not exciting and not fulfilling the relationship was. Like if it had been across the board all the same. But because my
Uh,
work satisfaction was like through the freaking roof, and then I come home and I'm like having this relationship and I'm like, dude, like, is this it? Because like when we're engaged, I would think that it's not going to be any better than this after we get married. Like it's probably only going to go downhill into like a comfortable place. And I feel like we're already at the bottom of the hill and I really don't want to see where we go down from here. Like I have
okay.
no interest
Yeah.
in seeing where that goes as we sink even lower. And again, because I have the contrast of like loving something so effortlessly and then fighting for it over here. And I'm like, do you really want something that you have to fight this hard to hang on to? Or do you want something that, like, the CDQA role, I had never found anything that, much like grad school, like, that took what was already going on inside of me and made use for it in the world. Like the
Mm-hmm.
combination of somebody who could talk business and talk business with a client and talk code with the developers. Like there was only like four of us at the whole company who could do this. And
Yeah.
again, after we were done and they moved us on, like they put other people in that role. It became a thing that like these are the people who can translate between the two groups, and you need that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing that like I have value to bring to the
Mm-hmm.
table big time. And that look at like this is working and people appreciating what I'm doing. And then at home, no, like there's not that. And so the contrast was so undeniable. And
Mm-hmm.
still, though, I mean, I was thinking these things and I was having these like, I wish this was better kind of thoughts. Like, I wish this was different. And it basically came down to I stuffed the wedding invitations like in June, and we were supposed to get married in September. And those wedding invitations, they sat on my coffee table for like 2 months, like just sat there. And every day I looked at them
Oh
and I was like,
no.
I just don't feel like going to the post office today. Like that
Oh
was
my
all I was
goodness.
thinking was like, I don't feel like dropping those off today. And by the time I canceled the wedding, I mean, it's only 6 weeks before, and I never did mail the invitations. And one day I'm coming down after work. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I under the building in the parking garage. I like shut my door and I just start crying. I just start bawling like uncontrollably. And I was so confused because I'm like, what is this? Like, what's going on? I have no reason to be crying. I don't, not that I know of anyway. And then this is a little bit supernatural moment, but like, and then this voice says to me, you need to cancel the wedding. And I realized when I heard the voice say that, that like the reason I'm crying is because I know I'm going to cancel the wedding and I'm freaking terrified. This will be the
Yeah.
scariest thing that I have ever done. As far as like, how do you even do that? Like, what do you even do? I Googled it. How do you cancel a wedding? And there are
Well, the good
steps.
news is you the good news is you hadn't mailed invitations, so that at least cuts out some of those steps
Well,
probably.
we sent save the dates, and that was
Uh,
part of why I had like given myself such a leisure with like mailing the invitations because I'm like, they have the save the date, like they know the date, if they're coming, they're coming. And if not, no big deal. The invitation's not going to change that. So I
so
just like
send
totally,
out a JK law, right?
I didn't send anything. I just never sent the invitations. And the people who knew told the other ones. And
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. That was that was a moment that I think I will include here as far as like how do you know you made the right decision in
Uh-huh.
moments like that? And so I Googled how do you cancel a wedding and I get the steps and like number one, tell the other person. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good first step. So
That's a
I'm
good,
working
good
on my
first step.
steps
I'll go
here.
with that.
Yeah. And then the other ones are like, you got to tell the vendors, and not everybody's going to give you a refund on your deposit, and yada, yada, yada. And yeah, like it ended up costing me some money. And
By that time, I'm sure you're like money well spent,
it was
right?
a great lesson to learn.
Cheaper than divorce 10 years later,
Absolutely.
5 years later. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if we would have even made it that long. So
Yeah.
yeah, why go through with it? So when I told him, like this was probably the next day. I didn't tell him immediately. I got an emergency therapist session, talked to her for a while, and I sit him down after work the next day and tell him, like I said, like we can't get married in 6 weeks. Like that's all I'm saying is like we're not getting married in 6 weeks. And he said, are you saying you're canceling the wedding? Yes. And he got up and he went outside for like 2 hours and he came back inside. It's dark 2 hours later. And he sits down and he's like, so genuine and earnest. What are we going to tell people?
Oh,
That's what he wants to know about.
oh,
And
okay.
in that moment, I told him, I'm like, I don't care what you tell your people. I'm going to tell my people we're not getting married. But in that moment, I knew for a fact I've done the right thing. If
Yeah.
this person is only worried about what is this going to do to his reputation, he's not asking me why I'm doing this. He's not asking me to stay and change my mind. He's not thinking about me at all.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel like I just dodged the world's biggest bullet. So yeah,
Yeah.
that it was a reassuring moment. It hurt my feelings a little bit that that's how
Yeah.
he felt, that he didn't care more to like fight more. But at the same time, I was like, this has been the problem the whole
Right.
time. So
Yeah.
again, probably best that we just call it a day.
Well, those kind of acute crisis moments are awfully instructive. I mean, they teach us about ourselves and they teach us about those around us. And it sounds like you've learned some things that were pretty valuable to learn in that moment. So
Yeah. I feel like it was like a true colors kind of
mm,
moment where I I felt like I was seeing the real him maybe for the first time, where again I had been wishing a lot for like things to be different. And
sure.
yeah, it's like you can do that. Sure. You can wish for somebody else to be different, but we have no control over anybody but ourselves. And at the end of the day, this voice, whoever told me you need to cancel the wedding, like my higher self, my subconscious mind, I don't know. I don't know. But I was already processing the emotions before I even heard the words because it was just so done. It was so decided
Yeah.
that that was what was going to happen. And yeah, scary.
I think I might have let time get away from us just a little bit. I think
Just
it's
a
been
little bit.
well over an hour. Not
I
too
don't
bad, but
I don't hate that this wedding story is like tacked on the end of an episode where like you really got to dig. If you want to see this part, you're going to need to
I'm with you. Yeah,
yeah.
I can
Yeah.
imagine.
There's
I
a
can see how
loyalty
you feel that.
quotient that'll have to be met
That's right.
before you're going to hear this story. So, yeah.
Yes, if you are the person that only listens to the first hour of the podcast and you
Yeah.
schedule it right in there, then you might
Yeah.
have missed this story.
Yeah. Nothing
So
wrong with
yeah,
that. Okay.
no.
But somebody maybe needed to hear something in there. And it
Yes.
was it was one of those things where talk about changing the trajectory of my life. You
Oh my
know,
God,
I owned
without
a
a doubt.
house in Sunnyvale and I was 6 weeks away from being married. And a month later, I don't,
Sunnyvale, California.
Sunnyvale, Texas. It's a,
Oh,
it's a
okay.
suburb of
Sunnyvale,
Dallas.
California is like right in Silicon Valley. I'm like,
Oh, fancy. No, this was not like that at all. It was like
oh, okay.
small town, but maybe a 30-minute drive if there wasn't bad traffic to get to
I
my
got you.
office in Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That because I was like, well, I mean, I know we're talking software, but I didn't know that your Dallas company got bought out by Silicon Valley private
No,
equity.
they
Because
probably wish, but
yeah,
yeah,
very
no.
good. So I guess we'll leave it here, and
Yeah.
when we talk next, I, I obviously things happened after that, and you moved from Dallas back to Kansas, and that's high on the list of things that inquiring minds want to know about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and we'll start with just a little bit more of the the software company story.
okay.
Yeah,
I
because
noticed that you haven't told us the name of it, and I
and I'm gonna
assume there's
edit
a
that out.
reason for that.
Yeah. Which, dude, again, like if you really wanted to know, you can go look. There's
Probably
there's
yes.
places you can figure out such things, but
Yes.
it's not important. It's
Yeah.
relevant.
I don't blame you a bit. I would probably look at it
Yeah.
the same way.
Yeah. I got what I
Very
got out
good.
of there, and it was a lot. It was a whole career, it felt like, in only 5.5 years of working there
That's
because it was like five different jobs during
yeah.
that time. And so far I guess four different. No, it was five. It was five different jobs. So we've talked about three of them so far.
Right.
So I still have two more jobs at the
Okay.
software company to talk about, which was a whole scandalous thing all by itself. So that's what we'll start with when we come back. Is like, why
Ooh, you
would
say
you?
scandalous, and my eyes get
Well,
big.
the
Yes. Tell
question
me
is,
scandal.
why would you leave something that you loved that much? Like you loved CDQA. Why were there two more jobs? You loved this. It was the best thing that you'd ever found. Like, why on earth would you give that up? And so
That's
that's where we'll start
exactly what
next
I
time.
was thinking. Because
Yeah.
I mean, even now to this day, listening
Yeah.
to you talk about it, it's
Yeah.
obvious how much you love doing that.
Yeah.
So,
The short
okay.
version is if they had let me stay a
Yeah.
CDQA, I probably would still be there doing that because it
Gotcha.
was it was a high that like I've never found in work since.
Yeah.
The combination of things was like so fun and it's hard to recreate, but yeah, they didn't let me stay. So
Yeah.
I didn't get to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where we'll pick
Well,
up next time.
their loss is Kansas's gain. We'll take it.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, like again, like it wasn't meant to be. They
Yeah.
they pushed me out and pushed me forward and I needed it
Yeah.
in that moment because I wouldn't have left that job. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think there would also be fairly high burnout quotient. Like you wouldn't want to leave it, but you couldn't do it for 10 years.
Yeah. That would be
Maybe.
hard. Yeah, especially with the way I was working back then. Like, I mean, it was easily 60 hours a week every week.
Oof.
And
Yeah,
I
it's hard
loved
to
it. Like, I go home at the end of 9 hours and I get back on my laptop and I'm like talking to my Australia team that like just showed up to work a few hours ago, like I was
say.
24/7 between all my time zones. And there was part
Yeah,
of me that just like ate it up, loved it. But yeah, it wasn't
I
meant to
can
be.
relate when one feels needed. I've had a couple of situations like that in work. Once I was a plant master scheduler, and frankly, at the SBDC, where it's like 24 hours a day. I mean, and it's like it matters because it matters to other folks, and it matters
Yes.
because like they really need the thing that you have, and
Yes.
it's hard to I can say no to almost anything. Actually, that's kind of not true. I'm the worst person in the world to say no. But if I really feel like somebody needs that thing that I got and I can give it to them, it's so hard to say no to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I was right there. I'm glad
Yeah.
you pinpointed that because as a person, like maybe we all love to be needed, but I love it a lot, maybe more than average.
Yes, I
So,
can relate. Yeah.
yeah, so being of service is one of my greatest all-time passions. And when nobody is benefiting from my service, then it's like, well, maybe I keep doing it, maybe I don't. But yeah, like in that role, dude, like the UK team shows up at 1 a.m. my time. The Australia team shows up at 4 p.m. my time. So, like, literally 24/7, my inbox is just receiving these requests of like, hey, do you know what this is? Have you heard anything about this? Like, my client wants this. Like, just constantly the go to of like, I'm the hub into the rest of the company for these people. And
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was intoxicating, but probably like you
Yeah.
said, like if I had stayed, I would have gotten to the point where it probably ate me up and spit me out kind of thing. So
Eventually.
maybe for the best that I get to remember it in its shiny fun stage and
Yeah.
ruin it by staying too long.
All right. Well, we will get back to this. If you have
Yes.
any kind of outro for your people, now would be the
Thanks
time.
for watching. Thanks for listening, especially if you're still here. Like the
Yeah.
video, subscribe to the
That's
channel.
right.
We'll be back on future episodes for the rest of my story. There's already what's turning into a whole archive of other people's stories already on the channel. We're almost to episode 20 when we get here. I'm pretty sure this is like episode 19. I don't know that for sure off the top of my head, but I think so. Like,
Wow.
dude, we're cruising, and I appreciate everybody who has supported this endeavor so far. I know I have been having an absolute blast. Aside from
Well, and we
maybe
appreciate you.
the little pocket of anxiety before the last episode, but other than that, it's been totally awesome. So yeah,
That's right.
we'll see you guys next time. Until then, I hope
Okay.
everybody takes good care. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Got it. And so you probably want to do some kind of introduction, right?
Yeah, some big fancy one.
Don't make me do it.
Come on, Will, put you on the spot. No, come
No.
on. No. We just call that the intro. That like, hi, welcome back to my grocery adventure. Um, we are back here with my third episode of me telling my story. And for anybody that is tracking on where we're at in my story, you might be thinking like, wow, I don't think they're gonna wrap it up in this third episode. Like it's one of those
Maybe
continue
not.
next week kind of things.
Yeah.
I think it's very unlikely that we're going to get to
Okay.
the end right now. So there will likely be more episodes, and they may be a little bit later. I was thinking about this morning that it's really not the Carly show.
Mm.
And I want to do the story justice of how it all came to pass. It's a cool story, and I don't think I want to rush it, but I also don't want to air 6, 7 episodes in a row of like the whole life's journey of Carly. So yeah, maybe this third episode will be it for a little while, but we will finish the story someday, no doubt about it. Um,
I gotta say, I don't think your story is very close to being finished. I mean, I don't know you very well. I haven't looked at your driver's license, birth certificate, but you may have quite a bit of story left in front of you, like potentially, hopefully, decades even.
yeah. Yeah. And to like keep telling it as I go, like
Yeah,
I'm still living it right now. This is it,
right.
and a bunch of other things that are going on right now. So the story is still being written. And that's kind of where I ended with every other guest was kind of where are you now? And that
Mhm.
always gets to be a lot harder to talk about because like you're still doing it right now. So yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think we'll come back with multiple guests, hopefully, as we continue doing this for some years. We'll get back to
I think
everything.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, really
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
I'm really not in a rush. So yeah, we're gonna tell some more of the stories, some of my favorite part of my stories today in this episode. Um, yeah. And I think let's dive right into it.
Well, let's do, but before we do, I just want to mention that like it's January 2nd,
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
2024, right?
Hey.
So happy New Year. I know that this isn't going to be aired for a while, but as we're as we're recording the episode today, we are just entering into a brand new year full of
Mm.
opportunities and possibilities. And so I don't know, that tends to affect my mindset. I don't know if it does yours.
I get
Um,
very nostalgic. Yeah.
Nostalgic, interesting. I think I might be more of a like excited about the year ahead and not so much nostalgic about prior years. But either way, these, first week of the year, it tends to maybe put me in a different mindset, and maybe you, and maybe your viewers and listeners too. I don't know.
Yeah. I gotta
But happy
think.
New Year.
Yeah, thank you for remembering that and situating that because it definitely does. I've been well in the last what's it been maybe 4 weeks of recording the first two episodes every couple weeks, and
Right.
so recounting my story anyway, going into the end of the year and preparing for today. Like I think that might be why I normally am not a very nostalgic person, more future
Okay.
oriented, but this time of year it's like I always end up looking back and thinking like wow, look at how far when you just walk one step at a time like how far you
Mm,
can travel in such a short
it's
amount of time. It's phenomenal.
incredible.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is it? I think it was a Bill Gates saying that people always overestimate what they can do in a year, and they always underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So,
I love that. I love that so much.
yeah.
The steps that I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, like the steps that we can take every day, they're going to get you like a millimeter a day. Like you're making like such teeny little
Yeah.
progress that it's just not sexy at all. That like people are
Right.
like, why am I going to do that? Because like it's only this little bit. And it's like, yeah, but if you'll do that for every day for a year, you've got like a whole foot of progress. And if
Yeah.
you do that
That's
every day
right.
for 10 years,
Yeah.
you're really over there now,
Yeah.
like living somebody else's life that like this
For
person
sure.
back here did not have access to that stuff.
That's right.
But if you don't take the everyday little millimeter step, you're never going to get over there.
Got to grind.
Well, and like, is it automatically a grind to take steps every day? I really don't
Oh,
like that
yeah.
word. So, like, I'm
Not in a
biased.
bad word. I mean, I guess the word can have different connotations for different folks.
What's your
But yeah.
connotation?
I don't know. I like it. I
Yeah.
consider myself a bit of a grinder. I do some.
Yeah.
I work. I think it comes from, and I could be wrong, but maybe video game culture. And so I have a 12-year-old kid who plays video games, and so sometimes the things that you do to kind of bank points or bank like privileges for the future, they call that grinding.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
see, I learned something. I'm so glad I asked because my prejudice towards this word is more like hustle culture
Oh,
based,
uh-huh.
where it's like a point of pride that like you're hustling. And I'm like,
Oh,
dude, just being busy to be busy does not do anything for me. But what you're
yeah.
describing of like, I'm investing, I make
Hmm.
investments of time every day
Hmm. Yeah,
looking
yeah,
at very specific things every day.
yeah,
And so, yeah, maybe I am grinding and I didn't even know about it.
yeah. In some manner of speaking.
Yeah.
So we,
Yeah.
we got to get back to your story because
Okay,
we could
let's
just
do
talk
it.
about this stuff all day.
I
And so
know.
where
It's
we
so
left
funny.
off, you were doing a job that you were loving a lot, and not only that, but just the way you were describing it, I don't think you were doing this in a self-aggrandizing way, but man, it just sounded like something that you were really, really perfectly suited to.
That's just
Um,
how it felt at the time. you know?
Well, I imagine it still probably feels like you were really well suited to it. And I don't know. I have this sort of framework about careers that kind of goes in stages. And so a lot of times I think when you're in the earlier part of your career, let's say up until around your mid 30s, like the only thing that matters is acquiring skills. Like you're probably not going to get paid your worth, right? If you're lucky, here's what you need and here's what you're worth, and you'll get paid somewhere in between there. So like at least you can live and get through to it. But like the early career, I just think it's hard to be recognized and valued appropriately.
Mm.
And so you're in this spot, early career, and you're actually, it seems really skilled and really suited to what you're doing. And then what happened? You had to go. The business wanted you to not do that. Is that right?
Yeah,
They wanted you to
the
do something
business
different.
needs you to go over here. The business needs you here. And like that was there's an opening on this other team. And so the business needs this opening filled. And I am the best, most available candidate for filling that position at this time. And
Could you
that
have
was
said no? Was
no,
that an option? Okay.
no, 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 very similar to what you described about Target and how
Uh-huh.
they very much valued a person's loyalty to the company. Like those were the people that were getting moved up, but often they got moved up so they could go run the New Zealand office or something,
Right.
like
Yeah.
they're shipped out. And
Yeah.
I wasn't really one of those, and I really just wanted to stay doing what I was doing, but the business needs you here. And I did try to stay where I was, and that was not happening. And so I just went. I'm like, okay, the business needs me over here. It's been 2 years. Let me go learn something else. And the team that they moved me to was like my point of contact before in my role before. I was like facing the teams that supported the clients, and then on this side I have the product management teams that support like the developers. They are the product managers. They're responsible for like all the changes that happen to their products. So that was the team that they moved me into, was like, I'm going to be a product manager now. I'm responsible for not what the client wants, but I'm responsible for the tool itself and managing the change process to that tool, making sure that we're not going to mess anything up when we go adding stuff to it that people might want.
And so that could be a good fit. Ostensibly, if you talked to me at the time, I would have said, well, that's okay. Give it a shot. See what
Give it a
happens.
try. See what
Could be
happens.
fun. You
Yeah.
might be good at that too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I kind of got myself there. My resentment was maybe only low key, and I
Mhm.
went in with like mostly an open attitude. It didn't last very long though. I got real pissed off real quick because the business needs me over there, and what they needed me to do, they had me shadow other product managers to see what they do for 8 weeks. For 8 weeks, they had me sit at other people's desks and watch them work, watch them explain what they're doing.
I have this image of you as somebody who, from all of our discussions, you like to learn,
Oh, I love it.
but you're kind of an impatient learner,
Oh,
I
I'm very
think.
impatient.
You don't, if you've learned something, then you want to apply it and then you want to learn the next thing. You don't just want to sit there for 8 weeks if you're not learning the last seven of them.
I didn't I didn't learn a whole lot most of the time,
Hmm.
because when the product managers have questions about their own products that they manage, they go to CDQA, the role that I had before, because they're more in the system. So I knew the system. I mean, I was still basically serving in that role of like, even though now I'm a product manager, they're still coming to me for help with their tools, because
Mm,
I still know more about their product than they do, because I have a client that uses it every day. So every
okay.
time something breaks, I'm the one who has to handle fixing it. I sat
Hmm.
next to the developer and showed him exactly what was wrong. I showed him exactly what it was supposed to do. Like I felt like I learned nothing for eight
Uh,
weeks, and they had me just sit there. And so that's where, before we started recording, I asked Will how he felt about quiet quitting. Um, and he had a very encouraging response. We'll just say that, as far as he understands why an employee may not just want to give their all, give their all, give their all, because I am an extremely hard worker. And so it was very confronting, maybe in my identity, to have me just sit there for eight
Oh,
weeks
hmm.
and like, I don't get to be responsible for anything. I don't know enough yet to have products assigned to me. I need to finish my training. The same training that they would put literally anybody through, they customized it not at all for like the level of knowledge that I'm bringing to the position. And that just really pissed me off. And so they gave me nothing to do. So what I started doing was like, I mean, they've got me sitting at this person's desk for an hour in the morning and this person's desk for an hour in the afternoon. That's leaving like 6 hours of the day open for what? For studying the system, for learning the system. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So I started going outside. Across the street from the office, there was this cemetery. And I would just like walk for hours in that cemetery. And then it's like, oh, time for lunch. So I'd go back inside and like show my face, like, I'm going to lunch, guys. Okay, bye. And then come back from lunch and show my face and then go back to the cemetery and just walk and walk and walk and walk. It was so much better than sitting at my desk. They didn't need me to
I
do anything. The business
for
needs you here. I'm like, for
for
what? It
for narrative purposes, I must say I'm really glad that it was a cemetery. That adds a lot to the
was
story,
such a
actually.
beautiful cemetery. It was huge. I mean, this is like in uptown Dallas. So
Okay.
the fact that there's like, I don't know how many city blocks of cemetery, there's all of these streets that have names like
Yeah.
hope and belief and dream. And you just like walk in the waffle pattern of
Yeah.
streets, like lining the cemetery. And there were old, like 150, 200-year old graves there. It was
Interesting.
just so peaceful. And
I
so yeah,
bet.
they didn't need me, so I kept myself occupied. And that was, the probably 7 or 8 months that I was on that position. That's what I did.
What?
Yeah.
7 or 8 months? I thought you said it was like an 8 week training
That was the
program.
training. And then they gave me my products. So here's a list
Oh,
of the products that you're responsible for.
but it still wasn't more challenging.
It was like a couple hours a week to do what they needed me to do. And so then I'm like, what? Why am I here? You took away my favorite job. You put me here. You gave me nothing to do. And you still want to pay me six figures? Like, I don't understand what's going on here. I'm going to go walk in the cemetery some more. And they promoted me. The next job
Wow.
was a promotion.
That is kind of stunning. I mean,
Bonkers.
like it feels like the company that shall remain nameless just didn't do a very good job of like managing the resource that is their people, that is some
Yeah.
of their best people.
Yeah.
Like, that's really interesting. I mean, and not surprising, to be honest. I mean, I think that that's not terribly unusual, especially if you get kind of outside of my expertise of, you know, production, uh, um, factory production and distribution and logistics. Like in those worlds, it's actually pretty easy to measure the productivity of people. And I think once you get outside of that, it gets a lot harder. And so, yeah, that's really kind of stunning that they would
Yeah.
think that they were doing themselves good and doing your career a service by moving you from this point to the walking around the cemetery job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And same, like we talked about last time, like I probably would still be there if not for
Mm.
this little chunk of what happened. Like maybe eventually I would have wanted to expand and find something else, but like it was like when they did that and then for months I am quiet quitting because there's like nothing better to do. It showed me like this company shouldn't be in charge of how I spend my time, you know.
That is a really good way to say it. Yeah. They
They're
shouldn't
not
be in charge of
qualified.
how you spend their time. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be in charge of how you develop professionally. They just shouldn't be.
They
You
shouldn't
can't
be in
be an
charge.
indentured servant to that company. And that's a lot of times how, especially in earlier career, that people tend to view their jobs. I mean, they kind of allow the companies to turn them into a form of indentured servitude in a weird way.
Yeah.
So they try to do that. They give you maybe a little bit, not enough to do, not enough to learn, too much freedom. I guess I'm assuming here, but that 7 or 8 months that you spent walking around the cemetery probably was the beginning of the end of your time with that company, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because after that, like I said, they did promote me again. I think it was like a lateral move for me to go from CDQA to product manager. And then they
Mhm.
promoted me again like 6, 7 months later and gave me a different role, which I will give them credit for because usually they leave you there for a year, 2 years, like in the job they put you in. And I think they could tell that I'm not happy. Like you're freaking wasting me. And there's not
Mhm.
many other things that are going to make me matter than wasting my time. So they gave me my last job there where I reported to a VP. Her name was Adrian. I am so glad that I stayed as long as I did, that I didn't just quit immediately in the quiet quitting phase, that I did stick it out a little bit because working for Adrian was a pleasure, was a delight. She was such a strategic thinking visionary. And so getting to report to her, getting to like show her my work and then hear her insights, hear her like, oh, what about this? Like, oh, I love how you added that. That makes me think about this. And like she was like, yeah, I mean, I feel like she brought me even more out of my shell, like reminiscent of the CDQA role. And that was basically what it was like this hybrid between CDQA and product manager, where they had this one tool that they had kind of built over the course of like still figuring out what it was. And they wanted to do a ground up rebuild where they separated it into 4 different tools. And so that was my project, was like, we have the functionality and that needs to not be interrupted, but we're also going to completely hack it apart and reorganize everything. So I did that for the last like 7 or 8 months that I was there. And that project wasn't finished when I left. Um, how I decided to leave, like, so interesting because for a couple months at the end of 2016, I was downloading this message of like, your business is ready for you. And I'm over here like, wait, what business? And it's like, your
Hmm.
business is ready for you. Really? What kind? Your business is ready for you. With who? Your business is ready for you. Well, who do I ask about it? Your business is ready for you. And like I wouldn't leap because the way the software company structured their pay, their compensation, it's like you got like a 15 to 20% chunk of your salary through your annual bonus at the end of the
Yeah.
year that was based on performance. And so, I mean, it's a chunk of change that like I'm sitting there thinking like I am going to leave soon, but I'm going to make sure I get that because I want to make sure I get that. I mentioned Adrian and how awesome it was to work for her and how much I respected her because that ended up being the reason why I quit right before the bonuses. I didn't wait for my bonus because I found out that in her department, there was maybe like 60, 70 people in her department, 8 people who were at supervisor level. And that was where I was, even though I was managing a project, not people. I found out that like there's I can't remember if it was 4, like 3 in addition to me or 4 in addition to me that were planning a January 2nd exit. So like all on the same day, like half of her supervisors that manage this 70-person team are all walking out on the same day. And the guy that told me about it, he was like low key, like excited to kind of screw her. He's like, yeah, there's a bunch of us. Like, oh, I'm glad you're doing it too. And that just like did not sit well with me. That like you're gonna gang up on her on purpose. Like she's the best one here. Like she's so awesome. And so it ended up being like December 12th or whatever. And the bonuses would have been on the last pay period of the year. And I sat her down and I was like, I didn't say anything about anybody else, but I said, I have really appreciated working with you. I respect you a lot. And I did not want to leave you with this project right in the middle of things. January 2nd would mean that like all the quarterly rotations are already done. All the positions that need filled have been filled. And then I show up and quit. And now you got to go rework all the plans and everything to find somebody to keep my projects going. I did not want to put her in that position. So I turned in
Wait
my
a minute.
notice.
Hold on.
Okay.
Before we started recording, you asked me, how do you feel about quiet quitting? And I was like,
Oh,
hey man, company, you don't owe them a darn thing ever.
yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I gave a couple of examples of it. And you were like, oh, good, because I wouldn't want you to think less of me. And now here you tell me a story where it sounds like you voluntarily gave up 15 to 20% bonus on a six-figure salary just to quit a little early, just to not inconvenience this person who
Mm-hmm.
you respected,
Mm-hmm.
but frankly, who's managing for a company that's not doing a good job of managing their human resource. I mean, in fact, it sounds like they're doing a preposterously bad job of it if they're putting themselves in a position where half of the half of the supervisory staff in this part of the company is quitting. Like, it wasn't just you. Like, this is a systematic comedy of errors on their part,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And so you gave up that kind of money just to kind of do somebody a little bit of favor, and you're worried how that's gonna reflect on you.
Well, ish. Yeah. And I will say that I risked giving it up.
Did they pay you anyway?
Yes, they did.
That's good.
Because they
They should have.
appreciated the integrity of coming
Yeah,
to them and giving them the chance to figure it out before the end of the year.
yeah,
So they were like, oh no, you've earned this and it's yours. We're still going to give it to you. And the decision for me was not about the company. Like, it was such a brand new thing that I was working for a boss. I guess like Dr. Vincent comes to mind as far as like working for a boss that I really respected. Dr. Vincent, that was grad school. And then here we are 5.5 years later, and I finally work for Adrienne. And
yeah.
like, she was she is just a great person in general. And I really, really enjoyed working for her. And I felt like, coming back to like decades or years or whatever, like literally the question that I asked myself was like, in 20 years, how much is this, $15,000-$20,000 gonna mean to you versus in 20 years, you being the kind of person that like isn't considerate of people that like you really respect and have enjoyed collaborating with. Like, I felt like for me, it was kind of a character defining moment of like, it really isn't about them. It's about me. And am I going to like grab the bag and run and like flip the bird and like, F you guys, like you're on your own? And like, had I quit during the quiet quitting phase, had it still been like that, yes, that is absolutely what I would have done. But I wasn't quitting to that manager. I was quitting to Adrienne. I
That
was,
makes some sense to me. I mean, in fact, they say in HR management that people don't quit the company; they quit their boss. And it sounds like that's a generalization. It was clearly not true for you. And so, in quitting the company, it was unfortunate that you had to quit your boss, but you wanted to do your best to make it kind of soften the blow to somebody that you liked and respected. I can get behind that.
yeah. Yeah. And like, I mean, so many things clicked together for me to make that decision. I mean, if that guy hadn't told me that he's quitting on January 2nd and so are these other ones, and he was over there like all like getting off on how it was going to hurt her, like that
Yeah,
just was gross to me. I
yeah.
just couldn't even risk her thinking that like I was part of that because I'm not. I don't agree
No.
with that kind of like sticking it to her. Like there's just got to be a better way.
But
Like,
boy, that does say something about kind of the overall misuse of human resources that the company was engaged in. Not so much Adrian, but to have that many people, you know,
with some
that's
hostility. Like,
quite a bit. Yeah,
yeah,
gleefully making things really difficult.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
and teaming up, making a
yeah,
coordinated attack. And I was like, I am not about that. Like, I'm leaving, but I'm doing it because my business is ready for me. And I've been being told this for 2 months, and I'm ready it was just a matter of like January 2nd or
Yeah.
December 12th. And the other thing, they paid me my bonus. They paid me 2 weeks. They kept me for 1 day, and that was it.
Oh, that's cool. Very
So, I
good.
mean, by Christmas, I'm completely free. I'm like free and clear and get to
So
celebrate.
you're in Dallas and you're completely free and clear, right?
Mhm.
And so was your business ready for you? I mean, were the candles flickering and like did you start it on December 26th or what?
Isn't that the temptation? Wouldn't that make for just the easiest story in the world? No. It was 5 months later before my business would appear. In those 5 months, though, I did entertain one job offer and two startup company offers that like they just kind of were magnetized to me. Every time one came, I was like, see, it's happening. And those first few were just for me to get to say, no, not like that. That has too much of this or not enough of this or whatever, just kind of like really getting clear on what I wanted. And then, yeah, it was 5 months later, and I got invited to be the partner in the grocery store business, and that whole thing took off. But those 5 months of waiting to see if I had, leapt off the cliff and could I fly, or was I going to like smack my face on the bottom? I was ready for either one. I was ready to let it take a whole year. I had my kiss my ass fund, as my friend Taylor calls it. I saved and saved and saved and saved while they wanted to pay me like that to do nothing, especially those last like year and a half. The madder I got, the more I saved, the less I spent. Because I'm like, I am not going to be here for very much longer. And I need as many little acorns in my pocket as I can get.
So chronologically speaking, when was the cancellation of the wedding in that? Was it before that year and a half? You were
Yes.
still in the
Well,
CDQA
no,
position?
I guess it would have been August, September of 2015 was when I canceled the wedding, was supposed to get married in September of 2015. And then I quit in December of 2016.
Okay.
So, yes, the last year and a half included both jobs, the quiet quitting, canceling my wedding, like just this is not working for me. Okay. Like I
Yeah.
just canceled a bunch of things. And
Well, the funny thing is that for all external observations, I think most people would say, wow, Carly's got this great job. She's about to get married. Like, wow, things are really working. And something within you was saying, no, it's not actually. It's not working very well at all.
yeah, a quote that I found during that time that really resonated with me was build a life that feels good on the inside, not one that looks nice on the outside. Because
Yeah.
all the time people were, especially my engagement ring, it was nice, and people all the time were like, oh my gosh, your ring's so pretty, you're so lucky, blah blah blah. And on the inside I'm like, that is just a
Get
huge
it off me.
distraction. Right.
Ah.
It's a lie. It's so
Yeah.
sparkly, and on the inside is not sparkly. Okay. Like, and so yeah, it was through those couple years of kind of all of that intention really got seated in pretty deeply, that like I want to enjoy my life, not have it impress other people. If it
Yeah.
impresses other people, that's a bonus. But like I'm gonna make sure that it's nice for me first. And that was definitely like as I was leaving the software company, kind of where I was in my life.
I will tell you, it took me some time to kind of get to that place.
Totally.
You know, just whatever the kind of reasons are. I mean, the way that one grows up and yeah, it's really easy to think that it's important to impress other people, and yeah,
It's a
tends to
it's
drag people in the wrong direction, probably.
well, and like wrong direction. I've made peace with the 5.5 years I spent at the software company because of how well I saved my money while I was there. I mean, it was a life-changing opportunity to get to make that kind of money so early in my career that let me build my kiss my ass fund a couple of times and then
Mhm.
walk away and do what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
Like the 5 months of traveling, I did travel, so that cost a little bit of money, but I also wasn't working. And then building Cecil K's, once we get there, I mean, I didn't get paid for the first 8 months of doing that. So that
Is
was,
that all? Wow, you did good.
well, I was like, dude, like at some point, like I gotta pay my mortgage. I need
Right?
to, the grocery stores got me pretty covered in food, but like I like electricity, I like
It's
running
fun, yeah.
water, like
Mhm.
I have other needs. So yeah, the salary came on when it could, and when we got like super close to opening, and it's like, okay, we can see cash flows starting, and let's.
Electric utilities tend to frown on offers to barter food for your electricity
They're not
in the
into it.
20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They like the paper money and or the
Yeah.
data on the screen or whatever they're doing over there.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
fine. That's their way. So I need just a little bit of money. But yeah, that was over a year that I was able to like fund my life and have the freedom to point myself where I wanted to be. And even now, to some extent, like that freedom is still allowing me to
Yeah.
do what I'm doing. And the experiment continues of Carly pointing herself where she wants to be and not really worrying about, like, is this the most lucrative path that I could be walking? That is so not my metric anymore,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
So
So your business wasn't quite ready for you, but it was sort of close to being ready for you.
ready
How
enough.
in the heck? I mean, that's a big change. Like,
Mm.
I'm not even sure how to ask you to walk us from wild on the streets in, Dallas, Texas, having recently removed yourself from a software company to Cecil K's. And in fact, I don't. I'm sure I'm like many of your viewers and listeners. Like I don't know, and like I'm not sure what exactly this was. How did you get there? What was it, and how did you get there? How's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So I gotta say, like going home from the exit interview at the software company, they like at the exit interview, they like strip off like my integration with my phone. So like my email's not on my phone anymore, my calendar's not on my phone anymore. And so I go home from the exit interview. It's a Friday, and it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. And I look at my calendar, which for me is like all day, every day at this point. And I look at it, there's nothing on there. And you just like page forward for months and years and decades, and there's nothing on there. And like,
Gosh, that would be awesome.
it's the hardest feeling I've ever personally felt. It
Really?
it's how I have such a passion for this whole like retirement of the baby boomers, and like they don't want to make plans for it because they're just kind of pushing it off and stuff, and like sitting there on that day with nothing on the horizon for decades, like it was such an awful feeling. It was like
Wow.
suffocating and smothering and dark, and what did I just do? Like it was so rough those first like week or two. It was hard. I wasn't ready for that. I really wasn't. I didn't
Okay.
think it would be like that. I thought it would
Yeah.
be awesome, like, oh man, like, and there have been other times since then where like, okay, I'm free. There's nothing. And I'm like, this is great. But like that
Mhm.
one, I mean, I was working still, on my things, and to have nothing. Nobody needs me. Nobody has any
Okay.
questions.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what you're doing. Nobody cares if you woke up today. Nobody's going to
Yeah.
find you being eaten by your cat if you don't make it. Like, I mean, you're just in there. Like, you got no ties to anything.
That's really interesting. And this is your story, not mine, but it does kind of bring to mind like the biggest transitions in my life, like the place I worked for 17 years, I left on a Friday because I had a new job that started on Monday. And then when I left there, I left on a Friday because I had a new job that started on Monday. I mean, and then when as I've backed away from the various SBDC and KU commitments, it's in part because the commitments were already there in my valuation practice and in other things. So yes, my first thought was, wow, that would be amazing. Oh my gosh, I would love an empty calendar.
You
But
especially wouldn't. I don't think of
I don't
all
know.
people,
You
you
might
would
be
like it
right.
the least.
You might be right.
Yeah.
You might be right.
I
Okay.
wanted to take a year off. I was
Mhm.
psyched. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, the depression was real. Like that
Wow.
comes first. So
Okay.
again, that's a big piece of my heart around, you know, transition planners are like baby boomers need to get on the ball. And
Hmm.
I'm over here like you're pushing them off a cliff and they're scared. And I get that because
Hmm.
it's a fall. It's a like you're gonna sink first and then you're gonna learn to swim in your
Hmm.
newfound freedom. But like that's gonna take time. And like how many threads
Harder for a baby boomer because how old were you at that time?
28,
Right. So
29.
if you're,
Yeah.
and I work with business owners who are transitioning into retirement, and the things that we tell them that they need, you need to understand how much you need to retire. You need to understand the value of your assets, including your business, so you can
Mhm.
fill in gaps. And then the third and most important thing is you need to understand what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And
Yeah.
I remember when I learned that from the succession planning curriculum, I was like, well, soft skill stuff, whatever. But as I've applied it, there couldn't be a more important thing. And I could give you dozens of examples of how not understanding that has led to like incomplete transitions that didn't work out very well, and really truly like bad consequences for folks who don't understand that. What's your new identity?
Right. That's what you're giving up,
Yeah.
like is your identity. And I think again, like you can be like, oh, soft skills, identity, no big deal. It's like,
No,
trust me, that is the center of gravity in your freaking world.
it's
And if you
real.
don't
Yeah.
have one, you're floating through space on a big blue marble and you got
Yeah.
nothing going on. Okay. Like
Hmm.
it was a rough week or two. But right about that time, this is right before Christmas, my friend called me. She had actually gotten laid off by the company 2 months prior, but got a awesome severance package. It was like you get so many $1,000s for every year of service, and she'd been there for like 9 years. So she like put herself back to school. It was absolutely great. But anyway, so she was not working there anymore, and now I'm not working there anymore. And she calls me and she's like, "Hey, do you want to go to Japan and one other country with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, when do we leave?" She's like, "3 days. Are you sure you still want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." So
Cool.
we left right after Christmas, and flew to Tokyo. And then we were in Tokyo for a couple of days. And then we flew to Okinawa, which is an island off of the main island of Japan. And that's where her friend was stationed as an army doctor. So we got to stay with her for free right across from the freaking beach. And that's where I was to celebrate New Year's Eve, the end of 2016, wake up first thing 2017, and I'm on a beach in Japan.
Fun.
That was how my year started. And it was like,
What was the other country?
so we did like a week in Okinawa, and then we did a week in Chiang Mai I think that's in like northern Thailand.
Okay. Hmm.
So we
Wow.
flew into, gosh, like I can't remember the name of the main hub. Flew into the main hub of Thailand and then went to Chiang Mai. And so then on our way back, it was like something that Lauren wanted to not like check off her bucket list or whatever. She wanted to like fly around the world. So because we had went like this way to Japan and then like over to Thailand, like if you go this way, like we will have come back and flown around the world or whatever.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
Such a stupid goal. Such a stupid goal. Like, don't do this just for its own sake. It's not worth it. That flight home was like 53 hours long, four
Oh,
connections. Otherwise, it was going to be just like stupid expensive or whatever. So, yeah, like 2+ days. And I do not sleep sitting in a chair. That's just not something that my body is going to want to
mhm.
do. And so we had little pockets. There was like one 8 hour layover that we had where we did check into someplace so we could sleep for like 6 hours. And so we had these little pockets
Was
throughout
it
the
like a capsule hotel where you slid into a
basically. Yeah,
drawer or something like
that's
that?
how our Tokyo one was. You
Okay.
just had a curtain at the end of your bunk bed, and like that's what you got for forty
Hmm.
dollars a night. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Communal bathroom and everything else.
Hmm.
So yeah, on our way
Wow.
back, we had another long layover in Bahrain. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's in the Middle East.
Uh-huh.
And we left the airport because we were there for like 12 hours. We were like going to leave the airport and go down to like a market and kind of walk around and see, see what was down there. And that is like the main time in my life where I have felt physically unsafe.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Like it was just the two of us together.
Hmm.
And we both had on like long sleeves and like full pants, but like neither of us had our heads covered.
Oh,
And
sure.
we stayed for maybe 20, 30 minutes down there. And after the second group of guys started following us, we got back in a cab and went back to the airport. We did not stay down there for very long. And I
Hmm.
don't want to give that place a bad name by any means. It was my
Sure.
only time in a country in the Middle East. And yeah, it was wild, even in just those like 30 minutes. Like I only saw maybe one or two other women, and both of them were with their kids and their husband, and that was it. And me
Hmm.
and Lauren and a bunch of dudes. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is not, we're not doing the right thing. I need to
Yeah.
go back to the airport right now. And even at the airport, like the stink eye coming at us was just like, whoa, dude, whoa. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
enlightening on our way home after the 2.5 weeks of Tokyo and Thailand and all of that. That was like the trip
Yeah.
home.
Wow.
So yeah, that was like my first half of January. So
Cool. That sounds amazing.
it
Great way to
was,
start the year.
it was like really magical. And actually, while I was in Thailand, that was where I got the idea to explore what it would be like to go abroad and teach English as a second language.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
And I started looking into places. And, long story short, I was actually on my way to Costa Rica to be a certified ESL teacher when my cousin called and asked me to start the grocery store with him. So if he hadn't done that, I was going to Costa Rica to get certified and to teach English and to live there for a
Ooh,
while and then see what
fun.
happens. So,
That would be
like,
pretty fun too.
yeah, it would have been so awesome. I hope to still get to live in Costa Rica someday, but
Yeah.
wasn't time for that yet. So,
I guess not.
yeah. So that was like my thought when I took the year off, was that I'm going to go on adventures. I'm going to say
Uh-huh.
yes to life. I'm going to
Mhm.
travel where I want to go. Whatever kind of inspired idea comes up, let's say yes and see what happens. And so the next invitation came not too long after I got back, where I went with a person that still worked at the software company. They were sending her to Australia for a week to do stuff. And she's like, do you want to buy a plane ticket, share my hotel room? Maybe we hit New Zealand on the way back. And so that's what we did in March. We did 2 weeks of in Sydney for a week. And then we stayed with somebody who worked at the New Zealand office. So we got to stay with her for free, but stayed with her for a few days in New Zealand on our way back from that.
Cool.
So yeah, like all of these trips, I mean, other than that, I'd been to Mexico and Canada, and that's it. And so yeah, starting to go to all of these other places. And so
The
for,
world is a really big place,
oh
isn't
my
it?
gosh, it
I mean,
is
I
and it
think
isn't. Yeah.
the first time I ever really traveled, the first time I traveled kind of solo outside of the country, I was about that same age, mid 20s, maybe even late 20s. And it was
Mhm.
like, wow. I mean, there are so many ways for people to earn a living in this world. There are so many ways to live that don't resemble mine at all. Like, it was really an eye-opening experience.
Like one of the pieces that really comes to mind as you say that was like really eye-opening was in Thailand. My friend and I, we don't speak Thai. And like that
Sure.
language is the first place I've ever been where like
Hmm.
they're not doing you any favors. This is a Thai alphabet on the sign, and
Can't read the signs. Like, yeah,
I got
that's the
nothing.
thing.
Yeah.
In at least if you go to, Mexico or even French speaking parts of Canada, like, you can kind of read the signs at least a little bit. And in fact, most places even will there be some kind of secondary, for English speakers because
Yes.
people cater to us so much. But yeah, I've not been to Thailand, but I have been
Yeah.
to parts of Asia where
They're not
there's
thinking
not
about
even
you. No, they don't
nothing.
have money for English signs. They don't need those.
Yep.
Which I don't blame them at all. But yeah, Tokyo,
No.
was like that, where like there's
Tokyo
the,
is like that. Yeah,
and
it
they've
is.
got the, hey, here you go. Like we're still trying to take care of you guys.
Sort of. I was a little bit surprised when I was in Tokyo at how little of that there was, because it's this big international city. And so
Yeah.
all these other big international cities I'd ever been in were pretty much like, okay, you can figure out how to get around. Tokyo was like, wow. I mean, it was
Mm,
really hard
mm,
for me. I mean, I
yeah.
don't know if you experienced that, but
We got lost a lot just in general in
yeah.
all the places. So yeah,
Yeah.
we were okay with that though. We didn't like have a plan any day. It was just kind of
Yeah.
a wake up in the morning and like, what sounds fun right now? Breakfast. Okay,
Hmm.
let's do that. And like when that was over, here comes the next thing.
4 hours later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This big old breakfast. And then what sounds fun? So yeah,
Hmm.
it was a really fun trip. Both of them, the Australia, New Zealand one and the Japan and Thailand one. And so right around that time, I got the idea that so I started listening to a spiritual teacher in July of 2016. So about 6 months before I left the software company, I was looking for guided meditations and I found the spiritual teacher. And so I had started listening to them every morning. And early 2017, I got the idea like, here before too long, it'll be my 1 year anniversary of listening to this speaker. And
Who's
I,
that?
Abraham Hicks is the name of the teacher. And that consciousness is channeled by a lady named Esther Hicks.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that. She teaches law of attraction and basically like attracts like. And so the
Okay.
whole point was like, I'm miserable at the software company and my relationship that I'm in at this moment is also not super healthy. And here's the spiritual teacher telling me that like you're getting back what you're putting out. You're getting back
Ooh.
what you're putting out. And I'm like, oh, that's a really, really bitter pill to swallow that like
Yeah.
I'm the common denominator in all this? Really? Are you sure? I don't think so. That can't be right. So after 6 months of like studying or listening to her every morning, like I had made a lot of like 1 degree turns and kind of implementing like making gratitude lists every day and just some different things that were helping me to feel a lot better. And then I'm noticing like, wow, like people are responding to me very differently than they did before. And maybe there is something to this, like when you put it out there, it comes back to you kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like my intention to basically like, I know my business is ready for me. Like the voice keeps telling me. And so let's see if it can come to fruition. And anywho, while I'm off work, I decide like it would be really cool to see where is she going to be in July of 2017. And maybe I can like buy tickets and go see her and like see a live show or whatever it is that she's doing. And so I pull up the website and where is she going to be on the exact day of my anniversary, July 9th, 2016? That's right in the middle of her Alaskan cruise. So I booked a ticket and I went on that Alaskan cruise by myself in July. We left from Seattle, went north to Alaska and then back. And it was the most magical 8 days I have ever lived on this planet, ever.
Wow. That's something.
It was amazing. Why do you say that's something?
I mean, that's just quite a statement of endorsement of the like. I mean, that's a powerful statement.
It was well, I mean, I spent like 4 months looking forward to it. Like I had booked my
Right.
ticket. And so I had thought many times, like, what's it going to be like?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to meet people? Am I going to spend the whole time by myself? Like I was kind of just ready for whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Took a bunch of books with me. That was basically it. And the room, the cabin, like it was a 2-person minimum. So either you've got to pay for 2 people, even though I
Or
don't
have a
have two
roommate that you
people,
don't know. Uh-huh.
or be in the potluck roommate lottery. And so that's what I did. And my roommate was from Hungary and she was fascinating. By the end, I think we were both ready to not ever see each other again, but we had some really good days, especially in the beginning. And she helped motivate me to not be in the room then by the end of it, when I probably would have been more inclined to just kind of hole up and whatever. I found other
Yeah.
places where I could be. But yeah, it was just like the timing of like no plan, and I would get an idea, and then I would go there and I would meet like the most magical person and have this awesome 3 hour conversation, and then
Mm.
just like never see that person again and like get this other idea, or like walking into dinner and like I see these two ladies and they look, like maybe a mother and a daughter, like the age gap is there, but like who knows, but they just look like they're having the best time, and they're sitting at a table that's for like a bunch of people, but it's just them. And the maitre d or whatever is like walking me to a table for one, and I tapped him and I'm like, hang on just a second, do you guys mind if I have dinner with you? And I just asked him, and I sat down at their table, and I'm still friends with one of them on Facebook.
Wow, cool.
It was like, that was the magic of like, get the idea, follow the idea, watch the magic happen, like
Yeah.
over and over and over and over. And it just got stronger as the days went on. So yeah, that was in July. And so I come back from the cruise to Dallas, having already, right before I left for the cruise, my parents came, we packed out my apartment, and they drove my stuff back to Kansas. And then I went on the cruise, and I came back to Dallas and stayed with my friends for a couple of days, picked my dog up from the Ponderosa Pet Resort or whatever. And we drove to Dallas then a couple of days after I got back from the cruise.
To
Or
Kansas, you mean?
yes, thank you. Drove to
So
Kansas.
then you already knew that you were moving back to Kansas then. Part of kind of
Yes.
being all footloose and fancy free wasn't like, maybe I'll stay in Dallas.
Right. Like Dallas is an expensive city, as you can imagine. And
Yeah.
so my lease was up in July, and I knew that's why, like in Thailand, I'm thinking like, oh, I could be an ESL teacher and that'll take me out of Dallas. Like, I mean, I knew I was going to have
Mhm.
to leave Dallas, because if I'm not going to have an income, I can't afford to just stay here and pay rent. Um,
Sure.
so I knew July would be when I would leave. I just didn't know where I was going. And that's why, like, yeah, getting the Costa Rica plans ready. And then it was the end of April 2017 when my cousin texted me and he's like, hey, can I call you? I want to talk to you about something. And so we had a phone call. He sent me like a little paragraph of like, here's what I want to do. I was an immediate hell yes. And we got started on the business planning then for like May and June, and I made a trip back once or twice during that time. And then we took possession of the grocery store building when I got here in July. And that was when we
Oh,
really hit the ground on like the actual physical remodel. Then for 8 months was when I
okay.
got back. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well,
That's our time.
so
That's
what's
pretty good.
that?
That's an hour. That flew by.
Well, yeah, almost an hour. We got a couple minutes because I think we
Okay.
got I think we got started a little bit late. And so yeah, this seems like an appropriate kind of break point, I guess. But I think I think your viewers and listeners would want to know more about um, like what was it that drew you to it? Why did you say yes? And some of that, like why did you say yes to coming home? Was
Mm-hmm.
that a big part of it? Did you say yes to the notion of your business being ready now? Was that part of it? Was it something, was this a cousin that you've always been really close to? And so it was a yes to family, some combination of all the above, or something different than all of that?
Yeah. No, definitely a combination of all of that. Um, I will say that the offer coming from Chad was especially meaningful to me. The fact that he would want me to be his business partner meant a lot to me. And so that definitely gave the can I call you and talk to you about this, like that got my attention like first off because it was him asking. But then there was just something about grocery store that sounded right. I don't really know how to better explain it. Like my whole body was like, yes, like that is exactly right. There was something like kind of tying back to my roots in agriculture, and like
Mm,
really the food supply chain lives close to my heart. So to
hmm.
think that like my business is going to be like kind of the last stop on the food supply chain, like I'm going to get to deal with the customers who need the food after in my early years, more growing up with like the production side and like the farmers who are making the food. And now here I'm going to get to sell the food. Like it just made sense to me that of course it's a grocery store. Oh my gosh, like that's crazy. Um, and just the way oh, this is a big piece of it too, because he was speaking my language as far as the little paragraph that he sent me of like his vision of what does he see this being or us doing or whatever. It started off with like, we're going to do rural grocery better than it's ever been done before. And I mean, it went on from there, but like right up front, I'm like, challenge accepted. That's the
Yeah.
kind of shit that I'm here to do is like better than it's ever been done
Yes.
before. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
I can deliver. I don't know if I could actually do it. I was also excited by the fact that I knew nothing about grocery. That like I did work at that grocery store when it was Ron's IGA in high school. That was one of my part-time jobs that I had for like a year.
Me
Was
too.
really at the grocery store
I worked at Bud's Thrifty Wise in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yep.
stacking groceries, customer
Yep.
service. Like it's a skill. That's a
Yeah.
skill set that transfers. It was a great job for a high school student. And
It was. Yeah.
so I had that memory of like, I've at least been a cashier at a grocery store. I've
Yeah.
never run one or built one, never built a business, but I think I can do this. And it's that kind of like naive optimism that really fuels so much of my story of like, I've had multiple people, in fact, as I've been on this grocery store part of the journey, where they're like, how did you even get into this position? Like, my contact at the grocery warehouse, the first time he ever met me, he's a very tall man. He looks down at me and he's shaking my hand and he didn't even introduce himself. He asked me, how'd you wind up in charge of all this? And I, like, that characterizes just my whole experience of like,
Yeah.
being handed this radical opportunity to get to do this. I mean, I'm like 28, 29 years old, and here's this gigantic project, and here's, the funding to make it happen. And I'm the project manager, I'm the creative designer, I get to make it. That was another big piece that really drew me
Hmm.
in, was that Chad was pretty clear on, he's got the finance piece covered and lined up, and that ball is already rolling, and like I don't need to worry about that. But like the creative part, like the design, the actually managing the store once it's there, getting it up and running, and then making sure that we are there once it goes, staffing and all of that, like that was what the position, that was the side that he had available, that he needs
It's
somebody
kind
who wants to take that.
it honestly sounds a little bit like the CDQA job in a way,
Yeah.
just in that like it's you obviously like to learn things as we've covered. You like to solve problems. And so that's what you were doing. You were
Yeah.
learning and solving problems. And so it was not software related, it was grocery related. And so you're completely have kind of no idea how the operation behind the operation works, but it's something that you can certainly conceptualize from the point of a customer. Like, you know how a grocery store operates, you know what needs to happen, you know what the kind of hallmarks of customer service are, because you've at least, it's not a novel concept.
Yes.
So I don't know, that sounds kind of perfect actually. I
Yeah.
bet I can
That's
see
how
how
it
that would be pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it felt at the time,
Mhm.
was like, wow, like what a good fit. And there's no way I could have like come up with this myself as far as like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go open a grocery store. Like Chad wanted to open a meat store, like a fresh meat store in Whorton that would be, hello, Kitty, that would be like an old-fashioned meat counter.
Uh-huh.
And that like you'd get the meat out and wrap it in the white paper and send it home with the people, and like that's what he really wanted. And so he went looking in Whorton for retail space for where could we put that fresh meat shop. And as he went through the real estate offerings that Whorton had, one of the best ones was the old Ron's IGA building, this building that used to
Uh-huh.
be the grocery store, but that's way too big for just a
Mm,
fresh meat shop. But
sure.
if you wanted to do a whole grocery store in there, I mean,
Hmm.
that might be a real thing. And so he was kind of working on all of this, and I'm not exactly sure for how long, but I just think back to like, your business is ready for you. Your business is ready for you. Like, this idea cooked in his mind for a long time before he ever like
Yeah.
reached out to me and was like, hey, you want to think about doing this with me? So like, when I was hearing your business is ready for you, your business is ready for you, it's like, I think I was hearing something, something that
Yeah.
was telling me
Sure.
like, this is coming.
So, and I know we are getting close to time, but it's an interesting notion that, you had this opportunity where the funding was taken care of and you had a partner, but you had kind of, I guess, creative control over a lot of it or whatever. Excuse me, you poor kitty.
Oh, that kitty's
Um,
fine. Yeah.
yeah. Um, I guess I'm curious what Chad, you say, is that your cousin's name?
Hmm.
Like, was this his first run up that mountain, or has Chad started several businesses before?
Hmm. Started. He's a big business acquirer. He's acquired several
Okay.
businesses. But yeah, his family is in production agriculture, like farming and
Uh-huh.
raising cattle and that sort of thing. So he still does a lot of that kind of thing. But then he had acquired meat processing
Okay.
lockers, including Yoder Meats, which is down
Hmm.
by Wichita, Kansas, and that
I
has
know it.
multiple facilities. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, he has several other business ventures that, like, as far as running a business, yeah, he's done that many times. Though I don't know if, like, starting so much from scratch, if he's done that a bunch of other times, it's not coming to mind, but I might be forgetting something there.
Oh, that's
But
great.
yeah,
That
that
sounds
was
like,
definitely a big piece of like, I've never done that before. I've never run a business myself before. So
hmm,
it actually reminds me of Tom's episode where he was talking about how he didn't feel ready to run the business. And that's why he didn't buy the family store when it came available for sale.
hmm,
Instead, he went and like took business plan classes to like learn
yeah,
more about how to do that. And that was one of the reasons that I felt so capable, was because Chad had a business background already. And I knew that
yeah,
like my lack in that area wasn't going to be a big glary deal, hopefully. And it ended up being okay. And I learned
yeah.
a lot from him in that time that we've been doing this. But yeah, I can see why Tom wouldn't have wanted to go it alone had I not had the partner that was there. I would have
Sure.
felt a lot of those same hesitations of like, I am not
Yeah.
ready for this. But thankfully, it wasn't all on my shoulders. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit more of a natural break, and I bet
Yeah.
we are
Love
coming up
it.
pretty close to 60 minutes. So,
Cool.
so
Well,
we'll
that's a
do an
cool
episode
thing.
4, but maybe we'll let these percolate a while. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a good place to like leave it off for a while, and we'll come back and we'll pick back up with like some more in the process of Cecil K's, because that was really fun, especially the building of the store
Yeah.
was
Oh,
like
yeah.
very different than running a store. Let me tell you
Well,
that.
the name of the podcast is My Grocery Adventure, and we
Yeah.
just took 3 episodes just to get to your grocery adventure. So
I
I don't
know.
know. I
I
don't know
know.
how much longer we can make the people wait to
Oh
actually
man.
hear about your grocery adventure.
Well, I let us know in the comments if you're dying to hear about it.
Oh, there you
Tell
go.
us. Tell us about it. And we'll see. We'll see when we come back to finish the story, but we will. I promise.
I was just
Promise.
thinking, well, you're the showrunner, but you were one step ahead of me, and you were crowdsourcing that. So
Tell
pretty
us.
smart.
Tell us
Good
about it.
job.
Leave some comments. Drive the episode out into the algorithm. Leave your comments down below.
Yes,
Like the video, all the things.
sounds good.
Yeah, I would love to tell the rest, and we will get there, but there's also all of these other episodes that I have like in the pipeline now that are ready to
Yeah.
come out, that we're going to hear other awesome stories. And like I told Will before we started recording, like, I'm in no rush. I don't want to like, oh, squeeze it all down into just one more episode or whatever. Like, dude, we probably got like 3 or 4 more episodes to like really talk
Okay.
all about all of it. So yeah, I will come back with like another big chunk soon ish, depending on how you define soon. And yeah, we'll do
All
it
right.
when it's time. And just know that like there's something telling me about timing and how I move and when it's the right time to do certain things. So it is
Well,
not the right
listen to
time to
that.
continue. Yeah, it will
Very
be
good.
someday.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you,
Perfect.
Will, for
Well, thank
serving
you.
in this way, for
I don't
being
know.
my interviewer, making it so easy for me to tell my story. I have had so much fun in these first few
Yeah.
episodes. I'm very excited for the rest of the story whenever that
Oh,
is.
yes, me too.
Yeah, it'll be done in fun. We can be assured of that.
Okay. Will you listen to what the things are that tell you what the timing should be, and I will then listen to you and just let me
Thank
know.
you. Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Yeah, cool. All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Really appreciate it. We'll be back next week with other stories, other people's stories. I'm so excited for the guests that I already have some episodes like in the pipeline that are ready. And then I have lots of ideas of who am I going to reach out to next. The pipeline of potential guests is miles long. So yeah, one that really I'm excited about, but like all in good time, is Dr. Vincent. I would love to. I
Oh,
knew him from
yeah.
before my
Ah,
grocery adventure, but like he was such a huge part of like me having the confidence to, I mean, even get here. So I would love to go step by step through his story. I think that would be
wow.
fascinating.
What a story, too. I mean, I don't know him well at all, but just the little tiny bit I know him, like, there's got to be some unusual steps in that journey for sure.
I can only imagine, the
Yeah.
2 years that I spent working with him, we would have like 6 hour conversations in his office
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
just up on the whiteboard drawing all the graphs, all the supply and demand charts that you could think of. And just like his life experience of like being born in Ghana and
Yeah.
working at the think tank in Canada and like just and then being a K-State professor, like, and there's a bunch more in between all of that, I'm sure. Like it's
Yeah.
it's a it's an incredible journey. And he's just a
Mm,
cool human being in general.
yeah.
He's a very interesting
He-
thinker. So yeah, I'm very excited. All of that to say, I'm very excited about the episodes that are coming, the guests that are coming. This is not the Carly show as much as I love telling my stories, but yeah, we'll get back to mine all in good time for sure.
Okay.
I thank everyone
Perfect.
for listening. Yeah, we will see you next time. Okay, bye.
Bye.